Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John Dehlin. It's February 4th, 2022, and we are so excited for today's episode. We have a double header. We're doing two episodes today, one later with Dr. Simon Southerton about the creation. I'm excited to announce that. I will just say next weekend, as a brief 10-second announcement, next weekend, there will be Thrive St. George. So if any of you want to hang out with Natasha Helfer and David Bockavoy and myself and Jesse Funk and many other super cool people who are dedicated to healing and growth within the post-Mormon community, go to thrivebeyondreligion.com and you can register for Thrive St. George next weekend, which will be February, I guess, 11th, 12th, and 13th. Maybe even Bill Reel will make a special appearance. All right, without any further ado, I am so thrilled to be covering this amazing book today on Mormon Stories Podcast. The book is called The Glass Looker, Collected Tales of Joseph Smith, illustrated by Mark Elwood. It's a graphic novel. The back part of the book says, the Glass Looker follows an ordinary American farm boy named Joseph Smith who discovers he possesses the magical ability for seeing in stones. The Glass Looker delivers the origin story of the American boy prophet through the larger-than-life accounts of Joseph, his family, neighbors, and enemies. And if you just thumb through this amazing book, just the illustrations, the quality of this book, and for me, most importantly, the history are just incredibly noteworthy and even historic. So that's what we're going to be covering today. And we are so thrilled to have with us on the podcast, not only Mark Elwood, but also his partner or wife. I'm not sure, Erin, how you like to be described, but Erin is joining Mark, and Erin is an important partner in this entire project. Welcome, Mark and Erin Elwood, to Mormon Stories Podcast.
Well, thank you very much, John. We're very excited to be here.
We are.
So you've probably heard a lot of stories about Joseph Smith over the years, and we're hoping that we can share this in a new way, and hopefully you'll get a new appreciation for some of the stories surrounding Joseph Smith's treasure digging. Most of all, though, it's just for fun. Like, we love this stuff. We think these stories can be fascinating and humorous and eye-opening at times.
I love it.
Let's go.
So Mark, I don't know if you and Erin each want to kind of introduce yourselves just a tiny bit, whatever you want to say or not say about your biographies. Should we start there?
Yeah, let's do that. Actually, on the next slide, yeah.
Oh, okay. Bring the slides up.
Yeah,
if you don't mind.
Okay, there we go.
We're big nerds, and we have a slide deck.
There we go. There's the slide. So for those who want to join us, I should say this. For those who are just listening to the podcast, you will get so much more out of today's episode if you open up Facebook or open up YouTube and follow it, because we're going to have some amazing illustrations, even a map that shows a bunch of historic treasure digs, just really important stuff. So please follow us visually if you can. Okay, Mark.
All right. Well, so there's a picture of us looking silly wearing historic clothing. We're big history nerds, but I guess let's start at my Mormon street cred, I guess. I was, raised in the church, Mormon missionary, did the Tennessee Knoxville mission. I actually met Erin on my mission, and that's a story in itself, but we will not tell that today. And let's see, we got married in 2004 and then ended up leaving the church in 2011. It was just time for us to leave, and I don't know, you can probably expound on that, Erin. But
I mean, we hadn't read anything hadn't read any history. Mm-hmm. We live in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a very diverse place. It was easy to step away, and we just had at that time, we thought a very healthy break with the church, where it was like, it's not working for us, but if it works for you, great. We're happy for you, and we're going to figure out what works for us. But then when was that? 2015? The seerstone picture came out.
Yeah, and it kind of like reignited our interest in Mormonism, to be honest. Like that came out, and I hadn't ever really heard of that. Yeah. And then from there, I have a picture of Bushman and
Can I ask you guys just half of our viewers and listeners have never been Mormon, it turns out, and then a lot are just new to their faith crisis. So, do you want to talk about why it was even newsworthy that there was a seerstone, and why it even required a news story or an announcement?
Sure. I think for me anyway, just it wasn't what I was teaching people on my mission, right? So I was, it made me say, wait a second, this isn't exactly what I was told. And
what was the announcement for those who don't even know what announcement you're talking about?
So they announced that instead of the typical depiction of Joseph translating an old document, or the gold plates, using studying it, looking at it, understanding it, using the Urim and Thummim, which I know is another device, but it is that he instead used the seerstone, which is the same stone he was using for treasure digging. So it kind of confirmed treasure digging as well, but
they also released a picture of the seerstone, which was really the big thing, because if you had been paying attention, you could have known about the seerstone prior, but no one had ever seen what it looked like before that.
Mm-hmm. And it made it very real. Like suddenly this image made it super tangible that, hey, the treasure digs are real and there's more to this story here. So,
so when that stuff came out, it was where in your journey?
Well,
so we left in 2011. So we were out, and we were out.
Okay.
And I think our son had been born. Yeah, our son had been born, and we chose not to bless him. And that was kind of a decision, we made. And then,
well, we did have him blessed, but not at the church and stuff. We let my dad do like a blessing, kind of just a family blessing.
A family blessing at the house, but not for the church records.
Yeah.
But so the seerstone kind of reignited something that was kind of dormant.
Curiosity.
In us. And so we love history, but for some reason we'd never read Mormon history. And so that started that journey. So to the next slide, John. I can advance it.
Okay. Here we go.
Thank you.
Okay, so my career, I'm an artist, and sorry, I was going to tell about you first.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, anyway, so Erin, she's a massive reader, a history enthusiast. She wants to be an archaeologist, but she's not. But but she's like the #1 supporter of this project, and without her, it wouldn't be real. I could not do it. So there's a lot of people that have helped me with this book as well that I should probably shout out as well at some point. But sorry, back to the slide. I'm an artist. There's some pictures on screen of like aerospace engineering designs and things. I worked for 10 years for this aerospace company in Atlanta, and I made artwork that ended up with NASA and the Air Force, other like Virgin Galactic, other companies you might have heard of. And it was a really great job. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it was a highly technical field where I had to be creative within some confines of like what the data they provided. You can't just like make a wing or something, how you want on an airplane or something. It has to follow the designs. So this kind of applies. And when I decided I was going to start drawing from documents and taking a historical document and turning it into some artwork. And let's see.
We got to figure out a later.
There's some beautiful visuals on the screen. And I just want to let people know that this is about much more than art. And we'll be getting into this, but you guys know way more about Mormon history than me or most people who will ever come on Mormon Stories. That's an important part of today's episode and the book.
Yes, no, it's definitely a historical project, but it's I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So this is the cover of the book, and then Mark has depicted the 1823 retrieval of the plates, or I'm sorry, attempted retrieval of the plates. The first time he goes to the Hill Cumorah, and then on the right is 1827. And just already right
sort
there,
of expounded stories, right? Like expanded.
They're not the correlated version, No.
So the one on the left, just to describe it, for those who are just listening, the one on the left, what do they see?
So on the left, I have a picture of Joseph holding the gold plates and the foreground, and behind him we have a toad, and we have this character that is a spirit, a man with a long beard he's kind of got glowing eyes and lightning is kind of dancing around behind him. So that, you're looking at that and you're like, wait, how is this Joseph getting the gold plates? But this is the 1823 account, and the imagery is relying heavily on Willard Chase and Orlando Saunders, kind of their own accounts of what Joseph had related to them. So it's different, but also pretty exciting and unusual. And this is kind of like what we found with whenever we're adding in these other sources that we may have overlooked. And then on the right, similarly, we have Joseph in the foreground with the plates, but this time he's kind of has a bit more of an action stance. He's running, perhaps, and behind him, there's numerous demons, including a main demon that looks kind of like a skull with like horns and fire behind him. And those also, I think that one's pretty cool because 1827, when Joseph gets the plates, we don't really have much in the actual history, like he just pretty much says he went and got it. I think there's maybe a few more things to it, but if you add in a lot of these other sources, then you end up with pretty fantastic tale. And they're not all just, like what we would consider anti-sources. Like Brigham Young actually is one of the ones that speaks about Joseph and that there's millions of demons on the hill attempting to thwart his retrieval of the plates.
So Mark has a little sketch floating around the house of not a literal millions of demons, but a horde of demons on the mountain trying to attack Joseph Smith. And it's really funny. And there's another story of a demon that kicks Joseph in the butt.
Which our son's like.
That's our son's favorite story. But that's, not in the correlated version that we learned. So in the book,
this is like, okay. So Erin just switched the slide to show a historic document. And sorry, these are just our reprints of it, I guess. But what we've done is we've taken some sources and we try to draw right from the source. So we get details right out of it. And it's vignettes. Each time we have a vignette, a small tale, and then following that, we put the source in. So what I'm showing here is that we have Joseph.
He's dousing on the Yost
yeah.
Markle farm.
Yeah, and they mentioned that
What's dousing, for those who don't know what dousing is?
Well, dousing is a way to locate things underground. It's still in use today, and let's see,
it's like water witching.
Yeah, water witching is another name for it.
You can use it for lots of things, though, not just for finding water, which is kind of how we think of it as like a little like harmless thing that people try to do. Even today, people douse in Utah to find wells, find water, but it can also be used to find treasure and other things like that. And so there's this like pretty apocryphal tale about Joseph dousing on this farm. And, for instance, one of the sources says he was barefoot, or they say he was a barefoot boy. And so we draw him as barefoot. Does that have any significance?
Well, yeah, at first we didn't really think maybe it did, but then, the more we researched about dowsing, we ran into some documents that talked about how if you're barefoot, you have better contact with the ground, and maybe you're feeling the energy from the ground. And they would even put some kind of like water or some light acidic liquid, I guess, and try to really get in contact with the stick and also the ground. So, and then I guess the other thing I wanted to show there was just that I tried to pull, if the character is historic, a historical character, then I'll actually pull him photographs if I can find him. So that's Jacob Chamberlain on the right.
He went on to be a state senator or state rep or something.
Sorry,
Alexa. Our Alexa is going off, reminding us to pick up our son from the school bus.
No worries. And I just want to, that was such a great thing about this book is you'll read a chapter, it'll tell a story, but then you provide the documents so that you can read the original sources, and that happens each chapter. So I just want to validate that was a really fun thing, because you think I would read these chapters and it'd be like, well, I've never heard this before. Is he just making this up? What is this? And then I'd read the sources and I'm like, holy smokes, this is based on actual documents. It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the hero's journey or
well, I don't know how we're doing on time. Let's see.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, yes. So,
well, okay. So like there's a lot of history. You guys, I promise we're about to get into the history, but there's a lot of history, but this is also meant to be entertaining, right? And and you know, if you wanted to read early Mormon documents, which you should, because it's really interesting, but if you wanted to read that, you could read that. This is more told like a story. So Mark had to take these historical sources, stitch them together, and weave a narrative, but trying to stay faithful to like the kernels of fact that were in these sources. So
yeah, so if you've heard of the hero's journey, that's Joseph Campbell created this idea. And it's basically pick any, you know, early Marvel movie, or I like to relate it to Luke Skywalker because I'm a Star Wars nerd. But, you know, your hero or your main character is going to go through this path where he begins in an ordinary world. And if we're following Joseph, you know, he's just like a farm boy. Life's kind of boring perhaps for him. But then he gets a call to adventure. He meets some characters like Lumen Walters and Sally Chase. At some point, there's a refusal of the call, which means like, you know, they're afraid to embark on their adventure. So Joseph returns his seerstone to Willard Chase temporarily. He gets more interested in the revivals and the Christian stuff going on. And then, you know, Alvin dies as well. So that obviously is going to slow down his pursuit of his destiny. But then he meets a mentor in the form of Moroni, which has him cross over the threshold into the special world, or we like to call it the magic world, right? And do you need to jump in?
No.
Oh, I thought you gave me a signal. Okay, so anyway, he retrieves the seer. So wait, where were we?
He crosses the threshold and retrieves the seerstone.
Oh yeah, he gets his seerstone back from Willard Chase, and then jumps into a major quest going down the Susquehanna with Josiah Stoll.
And he does a lot of treasure digs down there.
Yeah. At this point, if you're in like a movie, you know, of a superhero, you're at the point where they're doing the montage of like the hero saving everybody left and right and, you know, stopping the train from going off the tracks and stuff. But with Joseph, he's doing just an enormous amount of treasure digs in the Susquehanna area. Sorry. And then but then he gets arrested, right? And that puts him in his kind of dark period, the low point. And that's where the name of the book comes from, the Glass Looker trial there. And just to bring it back home, you know, he recovers from that.
So like that's the point where your hero is like going to give up.
Oh yeah.
Right? In every movie, you can think like Spider-Man's had enough. Will he get up and do the final fight? You know, and that's Joseph. Like he's at the low point. Is he going to give up the treasure digging?
Yeah.
But no, he doesn't. Spoiler alert.
Right. So then, you know, he decides to continue with his quest. He manages to get the plates, bring him home, avoids all the people chasing him in the woods, you know, hiding the plates. And he reinvents himself. He's, you know, that part of the curve there, or the arc, is resurrection. Like he's reinvented himself as a prophet and has, you know, translated the Book of Mormon and formed a religion. So we think it's all tied together. You know, the stories that we're talking about, this is, you know, the treasure digging leads to the formation of Mormonism. So
that's fun. And for those who are like, hey, I'm not so happy about many of the things Joseph did. We're not happy with him being framed as a hero. What would you say about that? Because some do and some don't, but what would you say about that?
So yeah, this, you know, we're lucky in that we're avoiding a lot of the later problems with Joseph that obviously we don't agree with that he was doing. In fact, you know, even the treasure digging, you know, it's mostly harmless in a way, but at the same time, he is already, you know, tricking people perhaps, or leading people on at times. But so we don't want to apologize for Joseph Smith here. We're not going to give Joseph Smith a break or anything. But at this point in his life, he does function as sort of a hero in this way.
It's kind of a literature.
Yeah.
Literary.
He's the protagonist of the story, but if you're, I mean, I don't know, what's the name of that guy in Breaking Bad? Walter White, is that his name?
Right.
And so like you see them in all their good and bad, but their story and their journey is what's interesting as the protagonist or hero. And I would add too, though, we're talking about like, so we're very focused in up through the, you know, through 1827, the treasure digging years. 1820 is when the book starts, and that he's 15 years old. So we're talking about 15-year-old teenager. Not saying that means he's, you know, innocent, but he's a 15-year-old kid. And the book, through 1827, he is 22 years old. So we're talking about a very small window of time when he's pretty young, and before we get to the stuff in, Kirtland and Nauvoo that really, upsets people.
Yeah. And that's not to say, like, it is up for your interpretation here. Like, the way we try to structure this book, we try to stay as neutral as we can and just kind of illustrate the sources. Now, him forming a religion and becoming a prophet of God, like, that's up to you whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, So
that makes sense.
Continue.
Well, so volume 1 came out last year in September, and it's the years 1820 to 21. So when Joseph's 15 and 16. And it's basically the arc is the retrieval of the white stone. And there's a plan that we'll get through the publication of the Book of Mormon through various volumes. And so the series timeline is kind of mapped out in our heads of how that's going to look. I say our heads. It's really Mark's side. He's the genius here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's anything else to say about that. Just that I'm trying to keep it to 3 or 4 volumes, but we will see how that works out. How long how long Erin will let me go.
Yeah. So basically, this isn't the only book you're going to be doing. This just covers just a few of his early years, and even before kind of the Book of Mormon plates kind of stuff. Yep. And so if you guys, I guess we'll be sharing links in the description and in the show notes, but if you guys want to see more of these amazing books come out in the future, you can buy the book, which supports the project. You can tell people about the book to buy the book, which supports the project. And then you can donate to help fund the work for future books as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. So we wanted to start talking about a little bit Mormon history, more like in a meta way, and why we think this matters. And then we're going to talk about specific treasure digging.
All right.
If anyone takes anything from this, I hope they take, if you think history is boring or you don't enjoy history, I just really want you, one of my pet peeves is whether it's in Mormon history or other history, where people are like, well, that was a long time ago. People did things different back then. We don't know what it was really like. And I just really want you all to think about the fact that history is tangible. So I have here 3 photos. The top left is our son when he's 3 years old playing in a puddle outside the Nauvoo house in Nauvoo on the gravel driveway there. And then below that is a picture we took of the Nauvoo house from that angle. And then, we get home from our trip to Nauvoo. We were there with Sunstone, and Mark's looking at our photos and he says, hey, I think there's a painting of one of Joseph's kids playing in the same spot where our son is. So of course we look it up and there it is. And that's what's on the right. That's a painting that Joseph Smith's son, David Hiram Smith, did in 1865. I believe it's of him as a child with Emma. He's like reminiscing of playing with his mom in that same spot. And
or sister or something.
His sister?
Well, I don't know. It could be.
I don't know. I think it's unclear. But in any event, I have an emotional connection to this because obviously it's my child and, we were on that trip. But art and imagery really helps us visualize things that we haven't maybe thought of before, or help us find connections to people who lived in the past. And I just think that's really important to try to make the past relatable and remember we're talking about real people.
Mm-hmm. So now on the screen, we put up a slide that says myth before application. So, images can be like really powerful in helping you learn stories, and before you even know why you're learning them, I guess. So for instance, I have a lot of Arnold Freeberg art up here from the Book of Mormon. If I asked you to picture Nephi, everybody would kind of picture the same guy with the headband and the, one shoulder exposed, and he's real muscly. And I think same thing with, if we asked you to picture Joseph and translating the plates, you kind of picture him in like, that way, that all the paintings in the lobbies of the churches where he's got his finger on the gold plates and Oliver's back there right next to him, they're not covered up or anything. And, none of these pictures are historically accurate. They, in fact, we, I guess I was going to say, we don't really have pictures of we'll jump in here, Erin, about the.
Well, so, but
we
if
were
we
gonna-
said imagine Joseph Smith translating using the seer
Yeah,
stone,
that's-
every single person listening now has a different picture in their head. Now, maybe some of you are picturing South Park because that was the most common image that was known, but it's not like Nephi, where Nephi is in our shared cultural consciousness. Like we all think like the exact same thing, right? And so it's kind of disappointing to me because the early saints grew up with this magical worldview, and we don't have those images in our cultural heritage, right? We don't see Joseph like in our mind's eye. We don't see Joseph engaging in these pursuits. We don't see the magical spirits and demons and things that are the early Mormons and our ancestors believed. I think it does a little bit of a disservice to them because they, that was their faith. That's what caused them to make the decisions that they made. And go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that's why they follow Joseph, right? They take their experiences and apply it to Joseph and what he's telling them as well.
Right. So, Brigham Young gave a talk over the pulpit where he talked about Porter Rockwell and Joseph Smith treasure digging together. And that's the quote there at the bottom of the screen. And he says that he thinks that he would like the people called Latter-day Saints to understand some little things with regard to the workings and dealings of the Lord with his people here upon the earth. And I really love that because the treasure digging wasn't this like wacky like side thing that Joseph did. It was like the dealings of the Lord. And
you were going to get the treasure if the
Lord
allowed
wanted
it,
to,
right?
yeah.
It's kind of their perspective.
Yeah. And so the magical worldview, Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and Martin Harris are the three witnesses to the Book of Mormon. And we revere them for that role they played in our faith, or I'm saying our faith, share faith. I mean, as our cultural heritage, but we don't think about them as about the magical worldview that they also shared with Joseph and engaged in with him with the dowsing and the Whitmer family had a seerstone. And I feel like sometimes we know more about Nephi, who lived thousands of years ago. Dubious historicity, but if Nephi lived, he lived thousands of years ago. But as Mormons, we know more, like we are able to picture him better than we're able to picture what early Mormonism looked like actually looked like.
Yeah. And so these pictures you have here, tell us just quickly what they are.
Yeah. Do you want to? Or?
Well, okay. I made Mark draw these for me because it's one of my favorite stories. I read the John Turner biography of Brigham Young, and Brigham Young saw an army. How does he say? Great armies marching across the night sky, like on an arc, and they were marching towards the hill Cumorah.
You could hear the rattling of the sabers and
so he claims that he and his wife Miriam saw this. Separately, Heber C. Kimball says that he and his wife Vilate see this, and they don't know each other at the time. But then they end up meeting each other, and they both realize that this dates back to the date that Joseph retrieved the plates from the hill Cumorah.
Right. So they're like taking their spiritual or their supernatural experience and reimagining it with the events that Joseph tells them. So, and then the other thing we have there, just to kind of show Brigham as viewing the world through the magic world, he carried a bloodstone with him. You can actually go see that at the UDOP museum there in Salt Lake City. And it's supposed to prevent, if you were shot or something, it's supposed to prevent you from bleeding out. And apparently you can read the inscription there at the museum, and it talks about that he would carry that around to protect him, basically, like an amulet.
And that's down below.
Yeah.
That's that little square Julie looking.
Yeah, you can see it if you look at pictures of him. He's got it on a chain. There's like a couple chains that hook onto it.
So that photo on the bottom right is Brigham Young wearing it?
No, that's just an illustration I did one time for him. That's kind of like, make him younger.
Okay, got it.
So
younger Brigham Young.
Yeah. Okay. So when we're illustrating this book, we want to kind of show like, what did the people believe back then? And I'm trying to be as neutral as I can. And let's see, these pictures here are, well, let me just explain the pictures first. What we're looking at is we have some stuff from Martin Harris, right? All these things are from Martin Harris. kind of tongue-in-cheek, we have an X-Files poster, but instead of the UFO flying overhead, I photoshopped this one time just as a joke. We have the hill Cumorah and a sword that's being let out of heaven. This is some vision type thing that Martin has, and he said that he saw this the sword point in all the cardinal directions and then point downward at Cumorah. And this is similar to the Brigham Young story in that he later determines that it's the same date that Joseph was on the hill. And we're writing this book for somebody like Martin Harris, who's just a believer of Joseph all the way through. He believes in the supernatural, and he believes in the spiritual that Joseph is telling us. And the rest of the pictures there are, everybody kind of knows about him encountering a deer in the form of Jesus, but there's other stories as well that like
Martin or Joseph?
Martin.
Okay.
Yeah. He encounters a deer and apparently believes it to be Jesus and speaks with it while walking down the road. There's another story that I really like where he encounters a demon and it like frightens the horse. He smells like, a terrible smell, and he sees this thing, which is described to be like a upright walking greyhound cross the road in front of him. And he has other stories that have to do with demons, including one where he's sleeping the night on the floor of the Smith home, and he feels this great pressure on his chest and believes there's some kind of demon on him there. So
I love it. So
this really
is
cool stories.
This is helping us get a sense for this kind of the magic worldview that Martin Harris had by showing us these photos.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it's also the framing of the book where we're drawing the historical sources, regardless if they're pro or anti, like I feel like you can't dismiss. So if we write about an angelic visitation, because Martin Harris tells us he has an angelic visitation, then ex-Mormons will be like, well, but there's no such thing as angels. Like, why are you apologizing for them? But then if we draw a bloody Spaniard ghost, then the believers are going to get mad at us because, well, there's no such thing as the ghost. That's just anti-Mormon lies trying to discredit Joseph. And
we're trying to make everybody mad at us.
We're trying to make everybody mad at us is what we're trying to do. Because we're giving people the benefit.
We're just taking it at face value, whatever the document says, and illustrating it. And you may see that story as absurd, or you may see that story as like something that validates Joseph, So
just depicting what they experienced or reported to experience or what their worldview was. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Do you want to, let's go into that. That's
okay. Well, so the last point on this, and then we will be ready to get into the treasure digging. Oh, no, we're not. We still got more. Okay. But no, this is going to a broader academic sense though. It's really fraught to study Mormon history or talk about Mormon history because ex-Mormons want to use historical sources to prove that that Joseph never saw an angel. He never had a first vision. He never found any plates. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, believers want to use historical sources to prove he did. And we're all doing it for the purpose of, in 2022, is the church true or false? And so Adam Jortner wrote this fantastic book. He's a professor at Auburn called Blood from the Sky. And he writes about miracles and religiosity during this time period. And he has a whole chapter on Mormons. So just again, to take like a broader, let's like step back from Mormonism and say, what was America doing in this time period, right? And he says that our historical focus should be on what kinds of decisions about reality people made, the effects of their decisions to believe or disbelieve in certain supernatural phenomena. Because that's really what matters, right? Whether or not Joseph had plates, whether or not he saw the first vision. We're on Mormon Stories today because people chose to believe him. Our ancestors chose to believe him. And it's caused, this chain of events that leads us here. Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of the framing I go back to again and again when I'm trying to detach myself and say, okay, but what are we looking at here, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good.
So
just really quickly, it's a dance that's really delicate, and it's been a part of Mormon history for a long, long time, and even the craft of professional, Mormon historiography. Because on the one hand, historians just try and understand what evidence, what documents we have to support what most likely happened, and debates about truth claims and what is true and what isn't true, and faith and no faith can really get in the way, polarize, and do a disservice to accurate history being presented. So on the one hand, you can sort of set aside truth claims in that endeavor, but it's also fair to say there's a lot of people, both believers and non-believers, where for them the stakes are really high, whether this stuff actually happened or not.
The
So
stakes are really high.
what's
Yeah.
that?
I do agree. The stakes are really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to just kind of always be careful about what we're doing when we're doing it. And in this case, you're just trying to do graphical representations of the history as you understand it to be.
Yeah, and I mean, it's partly just because we're in a good place. We're not historians. I'm not a documentary historian, so I can sort of attack this at a new angle where I'm just going to illustrate it. And I'm not. I guess my people are. I don't know how to say this.
Like your motive is just to resurrect the stories that we didn't ever get told. Right?
Yeah.
Are they true stories? Are they fake stories? Are they anti-stories? Are they pro stories? But they're just things we never learned, and they're part of our heritage.
Right. And and my reputation's not on the line either, right? Compared to like someone, an actual historian. So I'm just, it's lucky, and I love doing it. So I'm really excited to kind of share these things. So let's go to.
So, okay, we'll try to move a little bit faster, but we, feel it's necessary to envision Joseph in new settings. We have this idea that he was a holy monk child living on his farm, reading the Bible with his family until the angel shows up and calls him to adventure, right? But in the reality is, his life, he had a lot more life experiences than that. And their family had housing instability. They moved from Vermont to New York. They moved houses. Do they own a tavern on Main Street one time or something?
A shop, right?
A pie shop or something?
It's cake and beer shop, right?
That's right. But anyway, so here's some illustrations from Mark's book. On the left, if you believe that he went to go get his white seerstone on the banks of Lake Erie, he may have seen ships like this. I remember Mark showing me this drawing he made, and I'm like, are you sure that's right? But that, that is what the harbor of Lake Erie looked like. Joseph may have seen those types of ships. And the tavern here and on the top right on the Great Genesee Road, that's like the interstate of the time, pre-trains. And it was a really big
and before the Erie Canal.
And before the Erie Canal, right. And then in the bottom middle, he was hired out,
Well, the story goes he's hired out to lumber, chop wood, and
for a season. And then when he's a teenager, and then on the right, he excavates a Native American mound. So
those are all stories that get featured in
places that we never, we know Palmyra and Hilkamora. Here's, some new settings for him.
Right. And
love it.
All right. So then new characters. Well, first of all, I mean, we wanted to show also not just new characters that we've never seen before, like Lumen in the upper right, Lumen Walters, and so he's leading a treasure dig in that picture, but also kind of reimagine characters that we do know, such as Lucy Mack Smith there, and she's smoking a pipe. And then we have Joseph Sr. with a beer on the right. And, there's nothing really wrong with that. That was what people did back then. But I think if you watch any, story produced by our church, we'll definitely not have them participating in these activities.
But these things both come from sources. So we're not just trying to be mean and show they were hypocrites or they didn't follow the word of wisdom. I mean, there is a source that describes the way that Lucy
lights her pipe with a broom splint, which is what I tried to show there. So,
and then, with Joseph, there's historical sources as to the fact he may have had a drinking problem. So, but at the same time, the word of wisdom is years from coming. So why would we avoid showing them engaging in social and cultural practices that were very common?
Absolutely. And I want to know that and for me, it's not even that I'm trying to find something scandalous. If Lucy smoked a pipe or if Joseph drank beer, that's just fun and interesting. And it helps give them color. Right.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Well, and it's not scandalous either. And so we're not, people are more interesting. History is more interesting when you think about the fact these are real people and not cartoon characters. Right.
Yeah. Love it.
So, so we keep talking about, we want to re-envision new places, new settings, new people, new ways of thinking, but none of this is new, right? These sources have been around 150 plus years, and the places haven't, places have been there. And, the places and characters are not unknowable. So going back to this idea, we started out with the history is tangible. You can go to upstate New York and roads still have the same names. The land lines are the same for the property lines. Houses that are 200 years old are still standing. You can imagine that Joseph saw that house. Families with the same last name still live there. And so, Mark had a friend that was a friend named Nathan who was traveling up there. Shout out to Nathan, who was traveling with his family on a family trip to Palmyra. And he said, well, I'm trying to find this Yost farm. And so he was trying to help Mark find it. And he drove down Yost Road. And it's been called Yost Road for so many years.
Me some great pictures and reference.
For reference. So.
And then these pictures here are, I was given, let me see the backstory here, is that I had a great friend, Johnny Stevenson, who's a historian. And he's recently passed, but he gave me a possible location. It kind of checks all the boxes for where Joseph might have retrieved his first seerstone. And so I was in Rochester on a trip it was for
John
Whitmer. And I went on my own little quest and took, photos for reference. And these are what I used to create the scene where Joseph does find his stone. And I try to incorporate things that happen, for instance, there was these two kids fishing, and I was like, that's not an unreasonable thing to be happening. So I decided to put that in. And then, and just coincidentally, I happened to find my own stone that just on the ground, I found a stone that had a hole through it, which is, it's supposed to be essentially a seer stone. They call it a hag stone, actually.
Yeah. Pretty magical, Mark.
Yeah.
I think this is trying to tell you something.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I had my own little quest. So.
And then last thing on this point is just that people in this area are still telling stories about Joseph Smith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have oh yeah. So I wanted to tell this story real quick. Another friend of mine was out. I was looking for a treasure tale about a place called Red Rock. And I was having difficulty locating this particular town. So, I used the source documents to kind of narrow it in on a Google map, and then zoomed in, and I saw there was a restaurant there called Red Rock Barbecue. So I was like, oh, well, maybe this is the right location. So I sent... so
you called them?
Oh, yeah, I called them first, and they're like, yeah, this used to be called Red Rock. There used to be a town here called Red Rock. So one of my friends, Eli Brady, who's also working on a novel about Joseph, he was in the area doing research as well. And he went there and ordered some food, sat down, and he asked, why is this town, why is it called Red Rock? And they said, oh, because of Joseph Smith. And he was like just blown away because he didn't let anybody know that he was trying to find out about Joseph Smith. They just immediately jumped there. And there's so many stories still in the area. I won't tell the rest of his story. I mean, he has a lot of cool adventures down there, but I just wanted to say that the stories that are still told there, they're the same. There's a lot of unique folk tales of Joseph, like walking on water and attempting various things, things like that, healings and some kind of supernatural events happening there that are very, we would not consider them in our normal telling of Joseph Smith, but they still tell those stories there.
Well, and what I like about that whole Red Rock story is that Red Rock is pretty much lost and forgotten, right? Mm-hmm. Is included in the Dan Vogel dialogue article. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to cast any shades at Dan Vogel, but it's it's probably pretty apocryphal, know, but at this end, it's, we have Google Maps today. And so Mark was able to locate this Red Rock barbecue using Google Maps, but it makes you wonder, well, how many other Red Rocks are out there where Joseph engaged in stories? And in preparation for this, Mark said, well, they say in the source, it was his first treasure dig. And I was like, well, I don't think they meant first treasure dig as in his first in his life, but maybe they meant first in the area, right? Mm-hmm. Because he engaged in a series of 3 treasure digs in the area, but we only know the one story. So it's kind of sad because it's really fun.
Yeah, love it.
But what we do have, I'm not going to read it because you guys all went to seminary and know your Joseph Smith history. But what we do have is, the one account Joseph admits to is with Josiah Stowell in Harmony for a Spanish silver mine. And he says, well, hence arose the very prevalent story of my having been a money digger.
So, I knew there had to be more to that story, and I wanted to figure out, okay, really, like, how many treasure digs are there?
Can I just ask one question?
Absolutely.
Oh, I never learned about Josiah Stowell and the treasure digging and the silver mine until I started reading, Grant Palmer or those types of books way later on. So my guess is there's a ton of Mormons who grow up just never knowing anything about any of the treasure digging. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah. And we were talking last night, when you read that account, if you're reading that in the 1830s, 40s, whatever time he wrote it, are you understanding when you read that, you're like, oh, he's referring to treasure digging, right? In the way that, I don't know, someone's making a TikTok today and you're like, oh, they're talking about TikTok. Like there's cultural cues, or was he, because it seems kind of like dismissive.
Like,
but I don't know if that's us reading it from today's lens or how people back then read it.
But you guys saw the little top 15 things you don't learn from missionaries about the Mormon Church, or about Joseph Smith, and just I think people just don't know that, like, the way Joseph met Emma was by going on this treasure dig in Pennsylvania, right, with Josiah Stowell, and he boarded at the Hale home, and that's how he met Emma, and that's why Emma's dad didn't totally love Joseph Smith, and nothing came of the treasure dig, and then he got in trouble for it. That's a really important story, and I think almost no Mormons who aren't into history ever learn it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's really fascinating because he did a lot in that area, and he was back and forth to that area, because it's not close. It's like, what, 150 miles away?
Yeah, that's about right.
And that's where the Glassacre trial happens. And so, I mean, it's a very formative time of Joseph's life, but, at the same time, it's where the Book of Mormon is translated, right? In the Hale, in the cabin.
Well, he starts
translating the plates, right? And then the priesthood is restored there. And so there's a lot of very important
if you go there,
events that happen there.
Yeah, you hear about Susquehanna, but you don't know why he got exposed to Susquehanna.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember reading that story that Joseph's telling. Is that in Joseph Smith history? There's multiple versions floating around. We meant to be more prepared on that one, but like I remember reading that in seminary or sometime and just thinking, did the Spaniards go to Pennsylvania? Like, did I miss this in history class? Like, that's what I remember thinking. Like, it didn't seem to like it made sense.
But just to make clear what I think you're saying for non-Mormon listeners, most Mormons don't know that Joseph Smith was involved in treasure digging. If they do know, it's usually they've heard about one. That's what you're saying, the Josiah Stowell silver mine. But what you guys are saying is it's way more. We're talking potentially dozens, and that's what we're about to talk about, right?
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
Right. Yeah, because he tries to dismiss it as just, well, I just was down there and I finally convinced him to stop digging for treasure. And and there's more to the story than that.
Like Clinton saying I didn't inhale, right? A little bit like that, right?
Yeah, something.
Well, because it doesn't make sense, because Joseph, like we just said, is 150 miles apart. If Joseph is just some common day laborer who's a digger that is being hired for grunt labor, why would he hire him from 150 miles away?
Yeah, there's
like why would Stowell pay to hire someone from 150 miles away, right?
Right. But we're kind of beating a dead horse. I mean, even the church at this point is like, yeah, Joseph was treasure digging. So I think, So what was fascinating to me, though, was to try to start finding how many there were. And that was, so let's go ahead and go to, after I started like categorizing them, I decided I would try to find out how many there were. And so
what he said was, Erin, I've decided I'm going to illustrate every single treasure dig.
Yeah. But I didn't know it was that many. I thought it was like 12 or something. But so
he was going to illustrate them and post them to the internet somewhere.
Yeah.
Little did he know. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah. So let's go to
this is a photo, a representation of many of the types of digs that Joseph would have engaged in. Can you just describe some of them for those who are listening?
Sure.
It's more specific than that. This is a chart of, go ahead.
No.
Well, okay, this is a chart of every single one is a treasure that Joseph was reported to have dug for. Like every single one represents a specific dig.
But it's not everything either. This is just some of the items. And what we are seeing is there's a grid of treasure.
32.
Wow, you're good at math. So yeah, we have a grid of, and each quadrant or each square has some item that Joseph was supposed to have dug for. And, not all these stories are as reliable as others, but some of them are we have lots of sources on. And some of them, honestly, like there's many stories out there that we don't know. Like we have a hint of it. For instance, William Stafford, who's reports his own treasure diggings firsthand, like his own account of digging with Joseph. He mentions a few other items that they were looking for, such as hidden swords, gold candlesticks, gold images, keys, and none of these have stories attached. So we can kind of assume that there's a lot more out there, and many of the accounts just say they were dug for treasure on this land, right? We don't really even know what they were digging for. So
some of the pictures in the grid, we have the 2 seer stones.
Mm-hmm.
We have wet salt, other minerals.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get to that on another slide, exactly some of these things
furniture
too.
But there's 32 there.
So so the next slide we have, you usually can take a treasure tale and break it down into these parts. Other folklorists do it this way, where you have the legend. It's sort of like the backstory, right? Like a pirate burying some treasure there. And this is like usually kind of a elaborate story of like how the treasure got there. Then you have the quest, like the present day, like how they went to retrieve it or try to acquire the treasure. And that can be fascinating. And then the result, like what happened or what we're left with. And you can have a treasure tale without having all 3 of those things. Most of them only have one part of this story. But on occasion, we'll have a story that goes all the way through it.
And this is not, and we're going to get into this in a second, but this is not just Joseph treasure digging. This is treasure digging was such a pervasive cultural practice throughout this period of American history that there's a lot of folklorists and historians that study just treasure digging tales in general without regard to Joseph.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Oh, okay. And then continuing on just like how I would organize these things as I was researching, there's you can break it down like in this way. And it's just because I'm I'm a visual person, so I wanted to make these like graphics as I was learning. So I would break it into, like the treasure, what are they going for, the location, where is it, the date, where chronologically it fits, participants, and the methods they use, which would be like magic or other ways they were trying to acquire the treasure, and then of course the outcome, like were they successful or not. And it's always important to keep track of your sources, so that was another thing I did. And so now we were mentioning what is the treasure, and I kind of would break it into 3 categories here too. I'd say, okay, we have naturally occurring things, so that's where you're dowsing for water or minerals. You're looking for a silver vein or things that could actually be in the ground, if you actually know what you're doing. Then the next kind of treasure would be lost or stolen property. Things like, and these don't necessarily have to be physically digging in the dirt, but sometimes they would look for, Joseph, for instance, would have a horse that he tried to locate, a bag of wheat, a pin lost by Martin Harris, or a stolen roll of cloth. And then there's other possible lost or stolen items, such as early settlers' money, payroll from early troops that could be out there, Revolutionary War cannons that were stolen and buried, and then last is the funnest category. It's the legendary items, such as golden furniture, conquistador silver mines, a saddle of a camel, or like ancient people's treasure.
I really want to know how the camel saddle ended up in upstate New York.
Yeah. That comes from Peter Ingersoll's account. And then we have a picture up just talking about the myth of these, like, again, like the treasure, how did it get there? And we have some illustrations that I was doing. We have William Kidd bringing the treasure inland. We have a demon protecting a box of watches. We have a guardian on a horse that is like protecting, actually, or trying to prevent Joseph from taking the plates in one account. And then on the right is kind of a montage of some of the other things. We have a picture of some of the ancient peoples that were described by Joseph and others. Not, you think Nephites and Lamanites, but also there's other people that are describing these ancient cultures that there wasn't, today there's not very much historical proof for any type of
any historical proof.
Yeah, for these type of people. But you think of almost like Lord of the Rings, little dwarves that live underground, or giants.
They have mines, and they have like technological advances, like basically like Gimli from The Hobbit.
Yeah, but I don't know if you have any other questions about those ones, John, but let's move.
No, this is super fun. These photos are super fun. And you don't, so when you get that list just really quickly of what is the treasure, those aren't things that just Joseph looked for. They're common things that lots of people look for. Or
no, these are all specifically Joseph.
Everything on that list.
It's a really tiny font, but
yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
And there's probably more. This is just, I just quickly threw this together. So I was just grabbing different accounts and dropping them in
coal,
there.
salt, iron, golden ore, wells, minerals. Like he was really into finding stuff.
Yeah, even if you don't really believe in his treasure digging, he spent a lot of time underground, like just digging for coal and digging for salt and water alone. Like there are a lot of things he's digging for. So
that's fascinating. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
So the most fun thing is the myth to us, because it's like supernatural and fantastic. And one of my favorite stories is like the golden furniture. Like Joseph goes digging for golden furniture, and I just picture this like desiccated corpse, like covered in cobwebs and like.
Oh, because he was supposed to be
sorry. Yeah,
he was supposed to be like Lorenzo Saunders kind of talked about it. It was like king, I think, kind of sealed up during one of their great battles between the Nephites and Lamanites. And he's sealed up, like just sitting on this throne. So it's a pretty cool story. And that one kind of leads into the Miners Hill story. And let's see if we can.
Oh, yeah. Can you go to the map, please, John?
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do now is switch to this map. Why don't you guys describe the technology you're using here and why this is so super cool?
Okay. Well,
it's
just Google Maps. You guys have it on your phone. But no, so Mark started with Dan Vogel's dialogue journal article of the treasures. Sorry, what is the title? The treasures of the
early locations of Joseph's treasure dig, or something like that.
Sorry, we like really bungled that one. So anyway, he has maybe 18 treasure digs in that one. Something in the teens. And so Mark just was plotting them on Google Maps because we went up to Palmyra in 2018, and Mark was like, I want to visit all of them. So we did. We drove through New York and we visited them. But then it kind of got out of control, because anytime Mark read a treasure digging source, he would put it on the map. So let me be clear. The green or the blue is not Joseph. The blue is just other people treasure digging. As you can see, the entire eastern seaboard has been dug up by people mostly looking for Captain Kidd's treasure.
Yeah, which is why it's along the coast there, most of those sites. But if we zoom into this area, Joseph's digs can be broken kind of into two areas. Zoom out a little bit more. We've got, the Susquehanna area down there and the Manchester Palmyra area up there. And I don't know if we need to turn a few things off, but let's zoom in. So we were talking about Miners Hill, for instance. It's right here. I'll go up. That's
So here is Joseph's family. They live in these cluster of homes here. And the temple's there. You cross over the road down here. You
have the Chase's property just north.
The Chase's here.
I think a little further. No, that is it. Yeah, that's Chase. It. And then right next to it is Miners Hill Road, it's called today. And Miners Hill is where Erin was referring to that story about someone who's been trapped inside this cave. I guess that's one way to look at it. But there's a lot of stories, and they don't all agree. But Martin Harris considered it holy ground, and some of the believers considered it a place where. Oh, we're gonna get into this later, by the way, Erin.
Maybe.
Okay. Well, we have a picture later. Maybe we can bring it up, but of Miners Hill, and I'm kind of butchering it. But Casey Kern did a lot of research, and if you want to learn more about this, you've got to check out his website, and he's got every mention of the cave. But we'll get into this a little bit more, maybe.
But so yeah, do you have any questions before we turn
No,
off?
I just think that if you're to zoom out just a tiny bit, it's so cool to just see visually how many digs Joseph did and how distributed they were, right?
Yeah. So this is Palmyra area. Sorry, I wasn't clear before. So the blue were other people treasure digging. The yellow are Joseph.
Yeah.
And then so if we go past the Finger Lakes,
if you zoom out and show all of them, show all the yellow, do a zoom that shows all the yellow. Like it's a lot over a lot of territory.
Yeah.
Right?
So those are New York. I mean, generally this is the 2 clusters, but we have 3 that are a little bit further out.
It's spanning Buffalo into Palmyra and then down into Pennsylvania. I made a joke that it almost sounded like, it almost makes me think of a gopher or a mole, right? I mean,
they're
digging everywhere, right?
They were.
Well, because you have to keep digging. I'm sorry, I just realized you have to keep going because there's like 8 over here.
Well,
they're all clustered together. Yeah.
So this is where Joseph is having kind of this area along the Susquehanna is where many of these digs were happening really quickly.
For reference, so the if you've ever been to Harmony and to the priesthood restoration site, this is all owned by the LDS Church. The Joseph and Emma Smith home where the plates were being translated, Emma grew up in the Hale home. This hill right here, or the graveyard where their firstborn son was stillborn. He died as an infant. Anyway, this hill right here, that's where the Spanish silver mine was. So it's like in Emma's backyard. You can just see it from the house.
Yep. And all right. Well, anyway, the map is cool. It's basically where I do all my research and try to drop things in as I find them. But
just to point for a cultural reference, the brown are Native American mounds, like actual archaeological Native American mounds. And so, the existence and presence of Native American culture definitely was an influence on Joseph's life. So
yeah, okay. And
are you able to go back to the slides, John, or do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to the slides.
Where are we? Let's see.
So that answers the question of where were the treasure digs? Where was he digging treasure? And because again, you can locate them, you can visit them if you are persistent.
Here's the picture I was trying to find, or was talking about. So on the right is a picture from Casey Kern, and he actually excavated where Miners Hill, the cave, was supposed to be. And he, his story is really awesome. And I think he did a podcast on Gospel Tangents recently, where he talks about this story. And if you haven't heard it, you should go listen to it. But they basically, use a backhoe and pull the dirt away where it's kind of caved in, and all of a sudden they have a hole, and they can stick their hand in there. They pull it out. You can go in there. This is like a actual location. You can go in there if you get property permission from the property owner. But you can see like the pick marks on the walls and the roof. And I just wanted to point that out, that it's like these are real places. There's a few of them you can still go find. And that one is very famous, very well documented, tons of sources. And on the left,
if I can interrupt, because this cave is man-made. This is not a naturally occurring cave. Someone dug up this cave for what reason? Were they treasure digging? Were they hiding stolen property? Was there a Nephite Lamanite battle? I mean, I don't know, but somebody dug this hole.
Yeah.
And
some sources say he took the plates back to this hole, not to Cumorah, and that they're actually buried in this hill. So, and then there's other theories that Oliver Cowdery was working on a printer's manuscript in this cave. And what else? I mean, there's lots of theories. Counterfeiting. Maybe they were doing counterfeiting in there as well.
So really quickly, so I guess in Utah and in California and other places, there are kind of naturally occurring caves from like water erosion and stuff. But what you're saying is when there are caves, maybe around Joseph Smith's area, it's more likely and maybe in fact that they were actually dug out or created. Is that right? Or not?
No, well, we're not geologists, so I wouldn't feel comfortable opining on that. It's just that this cave,
That particular cave.
very well documented to have been man-made. And
Okay.
so if you Google Miners Hill Cave, the first
Yeah.
hit that comes up is Casey Kern's website, and he has a database of every single historical source that ever mentions Miners Hill. And so,
and you can, it's really great.
Yeah.
So, and then we just had a few other places there. That's the map of the silver mine that was drawn by Emily Blackman, the historian for that area. And if you look in any history of whatever county, you will find a treasure dig in that area. I'm still finding them today, so I'm still researching some. And let's go ahead. I think we've talked a lot about that. So again, since I'm a visual guy, I just wanted to be able to keep track of these people, and so I started attaching faces to them. And this is kind of again looking back of how this turned into a graphic novel. On screen, I have a bunch of note cards with faces that I've attached to historical characters. Some of them, most of them, we don't have a photograph of. So let's see. Anything?
Because the characters, we use the word characters, but really, I mean, they're real people, are the kind of the stars of the show, and that they're hostile to Joseph or they believe Joseph, but they all have stories to tell. Like, so every single drawing here Mark made is a person with a story to tell about Joseph in some way.
And this is, Quinn said something like this, that a lot, I guess we're kind of going back again, but you just can't dismiss people just because they were hostile. And this is kind of that quote. It says, should we read it? Or?
It's too long, but
yeah.
But just, you should consider what the neighbors are saying. It's basically all he's saying.
So
yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, I just think for me, the visual of all those participants, we're talking about, like, if you just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many are on this slide?
Oh, 14. Let's ask the math person.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't count this one ahead of time.
56 names. So there's like 56 different people that, what you're saying, participated with Joseph in treasure digs. Is that right?
Yeah. These are not, and this isn't extensive. I mean, and some of these people would be that people that they witnessed it. I guess they weren't necessarily involved with shovel and dirt,
or they owned the land and allowed them to be on the land. But it's definitely not exhaustive. Mark was just like brainstorming, and he was just listing off the top of his head like the names he remembered.
Yeah.
But one I don't see on here is Alva Beeman. Wasn't he a treasure digger?
Yeah. I mean, that's
so
true.
But
I guess we don't really have a tale of him other than trying to find the plates under the hearth or whatever.
Yeah, that's just super. It's just really extensive. And then we were talking about this yesterday, I think, in preparation for this. I'm so frustrated that just because, and again, this isn't to be anti-Mormon. It's just to say how we should think about documents, because so often, I guess the Hurlbut affidavits or Edie Howe's Mormonism Unveiled, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but like affidavits were written, even including Emma Hill's dad, Isaac, of people saying, I was Joseph's neighbor. I went on digs with Joseph. I knew him. I knew the family. And they're writing down their memories of firsthand interactions. And somehow we've all been conditioned as, maybe as faithful Mormons to just say, if someone said something negative, it's anti-Mormon, and thus it's not credible and we can't even look at it. And that's, it would be just as wrong to say that a faithful person's account can't be credible because they're faithful. It's just as wrong to say that as it would be to say that if someone didn't like Joseph, their account isn't credible. But I think we've all been primed in the church to kind of feel that way, and we dismiss a lot of good information. True?
Yeah, it's a shame because a lot of really great stories get lost too.
And like you can, sometimes you can see through the bias, or because it's so obvious, the bias, whichever direction it is. But that doesn't mean that there's still not, there's still good information in there, a kernel of truth of some kind, or details that help us relate or humanize these people.
Yeah, like Isaac talks about the stone in the hat in the Book of Mormon translation. He says, and he talks about the treasure dig. He talks about Joseph not finding treasure. There's so much you can learn just from Isaac Hale's single affidavit, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was there, firsthand witness to all of it. So anyway, sorry.
No,
That's it.
all good stuff.
And that's what Dan was saying in that quote, right?
Quinn. Yeah. Right.
Oh, is that Michael Quinn? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of people involved.
A lot of great characters. These are two of them. We have Lumen Walters on the left, Sally Chase on the right.
Are you going to be telling later what their roles were? Because I think they're important.
Let's just do it right now, I guess. Just a real brief. Like Lumen is a seer who it's really cool. They're both mentors to Joseph, right? So Lumen Walters is a seer who is a little more trained in magical implements. He has a magic book, a magic stone, a rusty sword, a stuffed toad, and he has more elaborate treasure diggings. He's out there doing treasure diggings. He's also an antagonist to Joseph later. I would say he's trying to get the plates. They hire him to try to find him. Sally on the right is someone that Joseph would visit frequently, and
she was a neighbor.
And she's a little more of a someone he might be able to relate to because, she's
a peer. I mean, she's older than him, but not much.
Yeah. And her magic, I kind of consider to be a little simpler. She's mainly just looking for lost items. And she doesn't, as far as I know, there's no story of her participating in a dig, but she would send people, her brother Willard and Joseph and Alvin, directions to go find treasure. So she had a little green stone, and that's kind of, I portrayed her with the stone there that Joseph would look in to find, and that's the stone he supposedly looked in to find his own first seer stone.
And that comes, part of that comes from Lucy Mack Smith. Like in her autobiography, she says that Sally was a neighborhood girl that had a green stone, that she could see many amazing things.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, what's so crucial about both of them, if we're all just taught Joseph Smith has the first vision. He has the surgery. He refuses the alcohol. He loves the Bible. And then he has the first vision. That's kind of like what we're all taught. But the truth is, no, actually, he had parents who believed in folk magic. He had neighbors and people around town doing treasure digs. He learned about seership or scrying or glass looking from other characters. That's his first introduction to this world. And then the religious sort of stuff grows out of this treasure digging. And that's why Lumen and Sally, I think, are really important for people to understand Joseph Smith. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and because Sally, so the next thing on Mark's checklist of how to analyze a treasure dig is, well, how did they go about getting a treasure? If you were going to retrieve a slippery treasure that's guarded by a spirit, how would you do that? What methods would you use? And Sally was, as we said, a mentor that helped, or potentially, this is how we imagine it anyway. Joseph learned some of those skills.
So talk about what these panels show, just for the people listening.
Okay. In the upper right, we have Joseph looking into a hat. And this was a thing that Sally did, which, so we know Joseph did this, right? This is what we're being taught now, is that he would put the stone in the hat and look into it and see things. Sally also did the same thing. And there was many other seers that did the same strategy of looking in the stone in a dark place. We have other ones that we've looked up before. And Zim, for instance, there's a character named Zim, which I love. Maybe we'll get to him later, but he doesn't have anything really to do with Joseph, but he's in the area, contemporary, and also would look in a stone in a cap. And the other pictures that I have showing here are Joseph actually burying his head in the hat. I think a lot of times, even with a new artwork coming out from the church, we still kind of showing him just, it's not too weird. He's got the rock and the stone in his hat on his lap, but we can still see his face and everything. But most of the accounts describe it as, no, you really stick it right on your face and can't let any light in. Yeah.
to exclude.
It's so beautiful, that art, because it really brings it to life. It makes it so fun and interesting. And then just the history is so crucial, that Joseph Smith, it's not just that he used a stone in the hat. He got that idea from other contemporaries around him, like Sally Chase, who happened to be his neighbor. That there's so much that's important about what you guys are doing. So I'm loving it.
Oh, thanks.
Well, so then the one below is dowsing. We already talked about dowsing, but we know that Oliver Cowdery had a dowsing rod. It was even mentioned in the Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Sr., Joseph Jr. So and then dowsing, it's
still today.
Even today, we've had 2 experiences with local historians in different states who use dowsing in their historical research. So, I mean, dowsing is still really prevalent in American culture. I would say really prevalent. I don't know how many of you know people that douse, but it's persistent.
Wasn't the Academy Award winner of last year include dowsing, the one about the Korean family in the Midwest who they have to douse for water? You guys haven't seen that movie?
I haven't seen that. No.
Okay.
No.
It's in an Academy Award winning movie from, I think, last year.
Yeah.
Right.
And so one thing just about chronology here, because most of these affidavits don't have dates. They just say Joseph did this. And so sometimes they'll give a clue, like it was before my dad died. Like a character will say that. And so
then we have an actual date.
So we're like, okay, it happened before X date. But we had Mark chose to put the dowsing. Well, you should explain it.
Oh, it's just that like Michael Quinn kind of did a progression of magical implements. So went from dowsing rods to once to the seerstone, to another seerstone, a more powerful seerstone, and then from there to the Urim and Thummim, and eventually he doesn't even need that anymore. And
he can just talk directly to God.
Yeah,
receive direct revelation. So that was kind of how we chose to show it incrementally.
Got it.
So, all right.
Oh yeah, actually go to the next slide, because that has all the seer stones that. I mean, there's a lot of seer stones. This is just some, again, and not all from, I guess, the Palmyra area either. But we have just a page of seer stones here. We've got Joseph's, the photo the church released of the brown one. The upper right is his green seer stone, which is lesser known. And like I said, only, as far as I know, only has one treasure digging story attached to it.
That's the one at Red Rock.
Huh. And then the 3 seer stones to the left are all Whitmer stones, I think owned by the Community of Christ. That one on the far right is Lumen Walters stone. Just there's not really a description of it that I'm aware of. So it's just a magic stone. Just created my own version. Sally's stone we do have descriptions of. It's on the bottom left. It's about the size of a thumb, I guess. It's green. And then the white stone was shaped kind of like a baby's foot. And that one, that I'm pretty sure the church has it. And I really wish they would release a picture of it, because that would be pretty cool. And then we have
Joshua. Stone? The church has whose stone?
I think the church still has the white seer stone.
Okay.
They haven't released a picture. So I'm calling them out, and I want them to release a picture of it.
So they've released one, but not all of the seer stones they have in their possession.
Yeah, and apparently they have several, not just these 2. And they have, I think Brigham Young described a large seer stone, like a big one that they had, which could be one of these ones I've drawn on the right. But Joshua Stafford had a seer stone with a hole in it. And then, of course, Hiram Page, that one's pretty famous because it makes into the Doctrine and Covenants, where he's getting revelations from it, and they have to destroy it at the end. And then that's just a Nauvoo seer stone that he gets later that has all those holes.
The one on the bottom right?
Yeah. And apparently there's 2 of those, I think, again, from Quinn. So
Joseph uses that in Nauvoo, that type of seer stone?
There's no story attached, but apparently that's where it was found, in Nauvoo, and it belonged to Joseph. So I don't have any treasure digs that late. It seems kind of unlikely that there'd be treasure digs that late, but we do have, the event where they go to Salem to try to find some money buried in someone's basement. So, I don't know exactly, but their point is that seer stones are prevalent.
Seer stones are prevalent. All of these people knew Joseph personally or interacted with him and had stones.
Love it.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, and then this just shows some of the magic that would be used to try to get the quest. treasure. I mean, on the left we have lumens, magical gear. These are some pages and panels from my book, and you can see we've already described them, but a stuffed toad, a rusty sword, a magic book, and in the
Is it
middle.
imagine that he would just pull these out when he's doing some type of incantation? He'd pull out a book or pull out the toad and.
And most of this is coming from Abner Cole, so you really have to take it with a grain of salt. But he does it in two formats. He releases it as Obadiah Dogberry, his Book of Pukiai, which is really fancifully written, I guess. And then he also releases it a little more seriously as some newspaper articles called Gold Bible numbers 2 and 3 or something like that. So you can kind of compare the two things, where he has a serious account where he's like, yeah, this is what he did, and to his silly account where he's making it sound like the Book of Mormon. And there's stuff that definitely correlates there. So, and he probably did know firsthand because it was on his property that Lumen was digging at the time, I believe.
But so the rooster, you got to explain why there's a rooster.
Oh yeah. So Lumen kills a rooster and drips blood all around the area. And
that's not the only instance of animal sacrifice,
right,
in treasure digging. I mean, it's not like the most common way, but it's definitely
not just Joseph. Like other diggers in the area were doing a similar thing where they cut the throat of an animal, and different things would happen. Like the way the blood splurted might be the direction to dig, or they might try to secure the area from evil spirits by wherever the blood was. And so it's kind of graphic by today's standards, for sure.
I seem to recall at least one account where Joseph Smith has a black sheep killed. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's William Stafford, and he's doing that firsthand. So he's there. So most people would be too afraid to tell their stories where they're including themselves in it. But in this case, he is like, yeah, they got a sheep from me, and they killed it, and then they ate it, which kind of made me grumpy, and stuff like that. But
have you drawn Joseph Smith killing the black sheep yet? Have you drawn that?
No, and actually, I try to. So it doesn't specifically say Joseph kills the black sheep. I think I have to check. I might have someone else be killing that one, but there's other accounts where Joseph is like a lamb. There's a lamb that gets killed by him, or
a dog.
A dog, yeah. So there is a few other instances, but
Joseph was involved in multiple animal sacrifices in his treasure digs.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anything else you want to say? I guess just in the middle there, that's Sally when she takes her greenstone, puts it in a paddle, and is looking for the gold plates. Later, she's a friend, or at least, a friendly neighbor to the Smiths at the beginning, but they become enemies near the end.
She's looking for, so Joseph would have told her that gold plates existed, and so she would go out to try and find them?
No, this is after he retrieves the plates and he's hiding it. The stories we all hear where he's hiding it. He's not
being
hiding.
Persecuted by persecutors. Well, the persecutors, Sally Chase.
Yeah, Sally, Willard, Samuel Lawrence, all these people that were his friends or were working with him to acquire a treasure. Once he gets a treasure and he's not sharing it with the rest of them, it definitely makes them angry. So
a lot of the persecution of Joseph early on were people that he had maybe indicated he would share some of the treasure with, and they're like, hey, you promised, where's the treasure? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. That they I just think it's cool to think, because that's just an example. Like our whole life, there's always been these mobs, and these are people with faces, right? They're real people. So it's kind of neat.
People that Joseph knew, they weren't just like guys that got riled up in a tavern and decided to like march on the town, with torches. Like they're his friends, his neighbors,
Really quick. And I know we're taking some time to drill in on the top right. You've got a circle with a bunch of lines, like almost like a pie that's being drawn, and someone's standing in the middle and people standing all around. Like there's two things that come to mind for me there. One is just kind of it's almost like a seance. It's like this mystical feeling, and there's torches and it's at night. You just get the feeling that they must have been really spooked, that they're doing some Harry Potter like incantation. I almost expect Voldemort to appear there. That's the kind of scene that you depict. But also, I think it's kind of important, because if we know that no treasure let's just say none of the treasure that they were really searching for ever gets found in terms of like, chests of buried treasure, but that's what they're looking for. Joseph needs to be able to say sometimes this kind of blame reversal technique, which is like, you didn't do all the steps quite right, and that's why we didn't find the treasure. So there kind of needs to be a bunch of steps so that then the non-finding of the treasure sometimes can be blamed on people. Is that fair? Not fair? That's just my understanding.
No, that's fair. And in fact, if the next slide we were just about to talk about that. So you're just awesome. You're right on.
Sorry.
Where we were trying to go.
Clairvoyant, John, do you have a seerstone?
Maybe. No, I don't. Actually, I do. I'll look for it.
Oh, cool. So yeah, that's a lot of times I'll get this question, like, did Joseph find anything? And so let's dig into this a little bit. Just for your information, I have a pie chart up here, and it kind of is broken down to 4 successful digs, 17 failed digs, 12 partial failures, and 8 unknown. But this is really out of date. I just made it, I don't know, a couple years ago. And I was being pretty generous at the time, and I gave Joseph some successful digs based off of the fact that he came home with, a stone that he was trying to find, and then he came home with another stone that he was trying to find, and he came home with the gold plates. That's the third item that I count, and then the fourth was gold watches, and that both of those kind of get asterisks by them because the gold plates, no one really saw unless maybe perhaps spiritual eyes, or they'd fill them, but you couldn't really see them. And so that's one account, or one way to look at it. And then the other, the golden watches, I count it as something that he did find only because we have a source that says that they were looking for it. And Joseph Capron talks about that they were looking for these box of gold watches. But then we have Joshua Stafford later telling the story that they did find gold watches because Joseph was trying to unload them and he needed to sell them, but he needed to leave town to do it for some reason.
He needed to borrow Joshua's horse or something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is the story.
So presumably Joseph came into some watches somehow.
Yeah. But like John was saying, most of them are failed digs. I mean, that's by far and large, that's the way that it would happen. And sometimes it's really simple like that. Like, sorry, guys, we must have done something wrong. But sometimes it can be a little more dramatic than that as far as the story goes. In that there's some stories where they I guess this isn't a Joseph Smith story, but in one story they would spear the chest with they had like a magic spear. They plunge it down. They heard some coins jingling, and then so the main guy's holding it in place while the others are digging all around it, and then unfortunately it's suddenly like zipped away into the hill, and they pull it out. They actually retrieve it for a second, but it's like yanked out of their hands, and then they see it fly into the hill.
Yeah, the way, and this was told by Brigham Young.
Is this one?
Well, I think so. It says that it was quote, wrenched
there's
from
another
their hands and moves rattling away into the hill. Oh, you're right.
No, that's a different one, but it's very similar to that one, which is Brigham Young's at the pulpit describing one that Porter Rockwell tells him where the chest suddenly moves away quickly with a rumbling noise, and that is a treasure dig that Porter Rockwell is describing, which could be a Joseph Smith dig as well.
And I love that Brigham Young makes the rumbling sound from the pulpit, and I just I don't know, my imagination goes wild with that. He's mimicking the sound of the slippery treasure as it floats.
And I wish we had that recording because then we would know what they sound like, but we don't. But here's some kind of humorous ways that they've ended. I mean, it's just a fun way kind of fun to look at the ways that some of them,
because they don't find what they're looking for. Yeah.
So of the 41, just to summarize maybe a bit, of the 41 digs that you're counting here, and that's my number, you've only been able to find evidence that 4 were successful in terms of finding what they were looking for. And those would be what again? Just really quickly.
You have 2 stones and the gold plate.
So his own seer stones.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. and the gold plates.
The gold plates, John.
The gold plates. Okay, you're counting that as good. Okay, a successful dig. You've got a copy, a replica with you.
Yes.
Okay.
And then
should successful be in quotes there? I don't mean to be rude, but
well, I mean, that could be considered his most successful, depending on your perspective, right? So
right. Okay. And then the fourth is what?
The fourth would be this one I really shouldn't count, but it's a box of watches that Joseph said he could hold it to his ear and it would tick for 40 rods. I don't even know what that means exactly, but they're really big, and he was, according to Joshua Stafford, he was inebriated at the time, but he was like telling him, hey, I got these watches. I just need to borrow a horse. And it's interesting because they're told to how I think maybe a week or so apart from whenever Joseph Capron told his story about the gold watches on his property. So, it could be the same thing, could be unrelated.
Now, what about, didn't he find like a needle in a haystack in front of Martin once, or like a feather that was buried?
Oh, and they hit that. Well, those are the partial failures.
Well, I don't know. I didn't count that as a dig on this particular card, but you can count that as a win. In fact, partial failures, like I have a few items here. I have a piece of a treasure chest, right? So this is something that he showed to Joshua Stafford as evidence that he was successful.
At Sunstone, Mark had this little display of all the things that Joseph found on his digs.
Yeah.
Oh, he found salt.
Well, okay, that's another asterisk. But so I mean, they were digging for salt and they found salty water, but it was put there as a prank by an observer. So it doesn't really count. But and then I don't know how else. John mentioned the feather. There's a lot of partial failures like that. Like, Joseph says there's a treasure chest. It's down. You're going to be digging. You're going to find a feather. And below that is the treasure chest. Well, they said they found the feather, but they didn't find the treasure chest.
Got it.
But so like the distinction you and I talked about, John, because you were like, they never found anything. And I was like, well, it depends on how you frame it. To the people of that time who wanted to believe, or actually they did believe, it's not just they wanted to believe, they did believe in magic and treasure digging. The things they found gave credence to Joseph, gave them faith to continue to follow Joseph. Like, it's really easy for us to look at it very skeptically, but they would not have said that they found nothing. They would have cited the feather. They would have cited the piece of chest that Joseph showed around town as proof.
And like even in the court records, right? Or the statements coming from the court, I guess, you have them saying like, well, did you find anything? And they're like, well, no, not exactly. We were looking for gold and we did find a piece of rock that looked kind of like gold, so they were like, they would kind of explain it away to themselves even, but they would still believe Joseph. Right. So, and
just to be clear, the Josiah Stoll silver mine would fall under partial failure because didn't the shovels strike something, but then
I would count that I probably would have counted that as a failure. I don't think they ever found the mine in any way. A partial failure would be like there's an account, or Sormus Turner, I believe, they retrieve a chest, they see the chest, but then there's some kind of pyrotechnic thing going on and it explodes or vaporizes, and they're like, well, that sucks. So we almost had it.
Wow, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
And then there's another one about like a treasure chest, like going through the earth in front of their faces. Well,
this isn't a Joseph
right.
story,
but like this culture is, whether it's Joseph or not, it's the same culture, right? Joseph happened to like shoot off into Mormonism, but at the time they're all like doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So, describe the one with like the tremors.
Oh, yeah. So it's kind of like Tremors. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. I never actually saw it. I was too scared to watch it, but I saw like pieces of it. And so the part that sticks in my mind is where the guy's with a jackhammer and hits the tremor underneath him, and then it's like pulling it away. So in this story, they find a pot of, was it pot of coins or something?
Money pot.
Yeah, money pot. And they surround it with, this is one I'm actually researching, could be Joseph, I forgot. This one might, or related to the Smith family. But they surround it with some magical things to keep it contained. And an onlooker is getting jealous because he's hoping that he's going to be rich one day. And he's annoyed that they're finding something potentially. So he removes from the circle one of their magical items. And it says the pot just like dashed away, through the
but like you could see
dirt,
it,
and you could see
like,
the dirt rising and falling
Yeah.
behind it.
I love these stories
The
because
imagery is cool. Yeah.
then it gets like, it's not even history anymore. It's like psychology or something. It's like, what did they see? Or, what was that? How do you explain that?
And maybe we'll talk about this later, but for me, probably the most fascinating thing is how many of the digs failed, and yet people still believed he had powers. That is the most mind-blowing thing of all, because even Josiah Stoll, doesn't he testify? He's like, no, we never found anything, but he definitely has powers.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
how Joseph could make them still believe in his powers when he actually never produced treasure is the most fascinating thing.
Well, but so isn't that because you subscribe to the mythology, that you believe the treasure is slippery, and you believe that you'll get the treasure when God is ready for you to get the treasure, right?
And you believe that the stones have power, and that Joseph has the power to use the stone. You believe all that, right?
Yeah, and you have enough faith, like, so they'd even pray. It wasn't just like straight up magic. Like they'd be praying, and sometimes they have a Bible or things like this as well. So
I was thinking of an example. Josiah Stoll bails Joseph out or pays his bond, or I don't remember the legal terminology, I think, for back when, but there's another treasure digger in the in contemporary, a woman,
Mary Lambert.
Yeah, I don't remember what city, but anyway, so you read her story. She's very clearly, in my opinion, you read this, playing a con on this rich man. She takes 1,000 pounds from him. And so she's brought to trial.
$1,000 or pounds?
Sorry, not even. I don't know. It must have been $1,000. Sorry, because it's America, not British currency. But anyway, it must be $1,000, and she takes the money from him. But then he bails her out of prison. Yeah, because he believes in her so strongly. But then the source repeats that the jury was so taken by her that they were about ready to start giving her money to find stuff for them.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, well, this is just great stuff. I just love all this. So
let's see.
Nice work.
Oh, and John, you got into this a minute ago, actually, which I thought was pretty cool. That like when you're describing that circle and like how scary maybe that might be. Like I think it's helpful to kind of imagine what it might have been like to go on a treasure dig. I think it's easy to kind of read a book and be like, oh, that's silly. Those guys were silly. But you got to keep in mind that that wasn't necessarily the case. So I like to think of, in my own history, I think of a time where I was a Boy Scout and I was in the woods and very scared. We were supposed to, I don't know why they did this to us, but we were supposed to stay the night out there in the woods for some merit badge.
Without a tent or anything.
Yeah, without a tent. And honestly, I think you're supposed to be by yourself, but we were already breaking the rules by having like a couple of us together. And at some point, we got freaked out. We heard a noise, and we were all afraid to tell each other we were freaked out, but we kind of got as close back to camp as we could. And we were all huddled around, sitting on a stump, I guess, with our flashlights kind of shining out in every direction and just waiting it out, and pretending we weren't nervous. But every time we heard a crunch of, of a noise, it was probably just an animal, but our imaginations were running away. We'd hear or see bats, going around. And you can imagine that in Joseph's time, if you're out in the woods, your only source of light is a lantern, or like actual fire, that there's going to be some kind of freaky stories. When you leave to go on this quest, you're waiting till it's very dark at night. It's supposed, maybe it's a night that's supposed to be attributed that there's going to be ghosts more prevalent, or spirits from beyond that are there. And also the conductor of the treasure dig has already told some kind of ghost story, essentially, that, hey, there's a dead guy out there. He's protecting this chest. It could be like a headless thing, could be a spooky like animal that people see or something, but some kind of guardian you've got to defeat. Let's go out there, and we'll dig for it. And if we're lucky and we were able to defeat this ghost, we'll be able to retrieve this artifact, right? So I like to picture it in those terms. And then when you're out there, you can kind of like say, well, these guys are digging, and they have no way of knowing, because they're supposed to keep this rule of silence. They have no way of knowing what the other people are thinking, and they want to be faithful. They don't want to be the one casting doubt, because if you do, you're the one that's going to ruin the treasure dig, right? And I don't know. I mean, I guess
I remember when I was a Mormon youth growing up, we all were going to go to a cemetery at night. And there was a legend in my little hometown that like there was a spirit that would come out at night at a certain gravestone. But if it's dark and you believe in spirits and you're walking with friends and everybody's acting scared, it feels real. And I remember feeling creepy, weird, scary things. And then immediately, because I'd been taught that there's an adversary that can fill you as a spirit into your heart, then you walk away saying, I felt the adversary there, because you felt super afraid. And
did you hum your favorite hymn?
Yeah, exactly. And then you sing a hymn and you feel better. And
yeah,
I mean, I really like the idea that you're asking us to kind of try and put ourselves in their state of mind, right?
Yeah. And, keep in mind too, that not everybody that's going on the treasure dig was a believer. Like they would literally just hire people to dig. There's some people that were like, I don't know, it was a job. I was just digging. And, but there were, more often than not, there was a lot of people that were believers seeking it.
Well, because it's too easy to just be like, well, these guys were uneducated, or they were gullible, or they were simple-minded. I mean, they had a faith in something that's different than what we understand. And if that was a sincerely held belief by them, and then whether the conductor is preying on that belief is a different question, right? Mm-hmm. But there's no question in my mind every time I look at that map that Mark made, and that's just like scratching the surface, that there are treasure digs all over the eastern New England.
And it's still happening.
It's still happening.
We were just watching some YouTube videos of a guy who's searching for treasure right now. I mean, it's definitely
a Spanish silver mine.
Yep, of all things.
Yeah, and they tried dowsing, a psychic.
Mm-hmm. None of those things panned out.
The pendulum over the map thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yep, that's the gist of it. And I guess.
Well, but so actually there is quite a bit of evidence though, even though like, I hope people aren't thinking we're like too apologetic. We just want you to be like, we want you to humanize the people in history and not just be dismissive or condescending to them. Mm-hmm. And just try to understand them, because it's fine to scream through the ether, he was a con man, but like my ancestor didn't know he was a con man. They believed him. And if I want to understand how, they got to that point, I have to understand them. So I'm, we're not, I shouldn't speak for Mark, for myself. It's not like I'm trying to be apologetic. I'm just trying to.
Yeah. Well,
but,
yeah.
Okay. So I was gonna say, but to that point though, there are a lot of sources like the one I mentioned before, that Mary Lambert, where you're like, wow, that is like,
Ransford Rogers and
that is such
Ghosts.
A fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could just like, it is really bad. And John has opinions on this, but no, still some of the story, like the pyrotechnics get involved. You can tell they have co-conspirators.
Yeah,
on the dig.
Yeah, just different stories. Well, I don't know. I don't know a specific one I should bring out. But basically, yeah. I mean, there's sometimes. Well, here's an example. Like, I guess like even the giant on the barn. Like you could look at that as a spiritual apparition or of a past, ancient race, some giant spirit up on the barn. Or you could say, oh, that, if you're critical, you'd say, oh, well, maybe that was just like Alvin dressed in a sheet, or like trying to pretend he's like this tall guy. I don't know if people know, probably no one knows that story, but just, I think that, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just saying that you can read these though and see a pattern, and you can see where there's fraud, and that some of them are really, really obvious because the co-conspirators are easily identified, and the digs get more elaborate, right? And so like there's pyrotechnics involved.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really like what you're saying, Erin, and we need to really be clear when we talk about these sorts of things, what mindset we're wearing, because we talked about this right at the beginning of this episode with you guys. If we're in the mindset of like, well, I need to know if this stuff actually happened, what the probability or the likelihood is that this actually happened, because like, am I going to pay 10% of my income for my life? Am I going to get married and go on a mission and commit to obey the church until I die? that looking at the evidence from that point of view is going to make you sort of turn on your potentially your skeptical mind and have you say, now, wait a minute, I need to know what really happened. What's the credibility of all these people involved? And when you talk about it in that way, you're probably going to be looking at it and talking about it very differently than if it's just like, hey, these are human beings that had hearts and minds, and they had kids and grandkids, and they believed. And in that sense, you always want to bring charity and empathy and understanding, unless they're con artists, and then you're allowed to maybe have a little bit of contempt or frustration for them. But I love that mindset. Like, I don't love that ex-Mormons or critics sometimes just are dismissive and uncharitable and inaccurate in their descriptions of things when they're in the former mindset. And I love the idea of, just like you guys, you may not be necessarily Orthodox Mormons anymore, but you clearly love this history and you love these characters and you love the stories, and it's not just a passion, you're having empathy and trying to understand. And I really love that you're giving us all that call to try and open our hearts, and consider the joys and the humanity of looking at these stories from a more empathetic, curious lens.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're saying?
That is, and also, when you're raised in a faith that teaches you it's the one true church, and then you leave it, like, I don't know, the idea of a capital T truth that all humans need to subscribe to is something I don't really want to get back into that kind of mindset, right? And I think as ex-Mormons, sometimes we can do that, and just decide that this is that there is a capital T truth, and I just would like us not to do that. And I don't think it's about Joseph, just in general, it's like you have to, this is the way to be an ex-Mormon.
So kind of fundamentalist in the other direction.
Yeah. We've all been there, done that. Let's try something else now.
I love it. You're calling us to a higher place, Erin. I love it.
I'm trying.
I'm just trying to draw cool stories. I mean, I don't know what y'all are talking about.
Sorry. Mark just gets he just geeks out about the details.
We need it all.
He'll be like, Erin, he'll come up upstairs from his office and he'll be like, hey, Erin, I just read a story where someone threw a skunk into a treasure pit.
to end the dig, yeah.
And he's just having the best time. Well, John, that's the end of the content that we had prepared. Would you like to ask any questions?
Wait. Oh, wow. Okay. So that's all. That's what you guys.
We're at open. We have a lot of questions we have a lot of information in our heads if you have questions.
Okay. So yeah. Man, I didn't realize I could ask questions. So I'm going to invite our audience right now. Anyone, we have 374 people tuned in live right now, either through Facebook or YouTube. So I'm going to invite audience members right now to type into their chat windows. This is really important because I think you guys are a little bit understated. I mean, maybe Dan Vogel knows more than you guys, maybe John Hamer. There are going to be some people who might know more than you guys about some things, but you guys are historians as far as I'm concerned, and you're super knowledgeable. And so I just want to call that out and give you guys credit, and call on my audience right now to take this opportunity to ask if you've ever, audience members, had questions about the treasure digging, about the seerstone, about the Susquehanna area or M.R. Isaac Hale or any of that. I want to invite people to write those questions right now. I'm going to go ahead and start with just my biggest question. Do you think that Emma, when she was down in Susquehanna, is there any evidence, when Joseph was down in that area with the Stolls, do you know of any evidence whether or not Emma went on the digs just like Isaac did? And is there any evidence that Emma really thought Joseph had these powers, and why, other than love or attraction, why it was that Isaac walked away feeling like Joseph was a charlatan, but his daughter walks away not only ignoring her dad's feelings about Joseph, but probably believing that he had powers. Anything you know about Emma's knowledge of and or involvement in and or opinions about Joseph's treasure digging?
Well, I will say, it's, first of all, we wish we had the writings of Emma, we really don't have that. So it's kind of hard to exactly get in her brain and know what she's thinking. But we don't really have any stories of her involved in the treasure digging. But if you want to explore that, I don't know if I should or not, but Eli Brady is definitely looking into that and has been doing some research in that vein. So he's a friend of mine, and we mentioned him in the podcast earlier. So
yeah. So actually, when you were looking at the slide, you were preparing, and we looked at the slide participants. I said Emma's name isn't on here.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, well, because we don't have any evidence of her really participating in digs.
Mm-hmm.
The only one I would note is that she goes with Joseph to retrieve the plates.
That's true. On 1827.
And it depends on whether you consider that a treasure dig or not. So.
Yeah. And so, yeah, sorry. Right now, I haven't thought a lot about Susquehanna for a while. When I started the project, I got an overview of the entire project. So I'm kind of like trying to remember these things because I'm really focused in on the Manchester area at the moment. But I just don't. It is a good question on why did she follow Joseph? And we do have a story where she seems to regret her decision to go to Manchester with Joseph. She's crying in the Saunders home. She was friends with Melissa Saunders, I think. And she's crying and says, I've been deceived. So there is that story, but we don't, what is she deceived about? Is she deceived about her decision? Did Joseph trick her in some way? Or, we just don't know the whole story there. You could let your imagination go there.
That honestly is what's really fun about this, is that we do try to
like a giant puzzle.
If the details are there, we try to stick by them, but there's so many gaps that we get to fill with our imaginations. So,
yeah. Okay, so you're saying you've been focusing on the time way before.
Well, just for this first volume, and the second volume will mostly be in Manchester area as well.
1823 is the first time he goes to Hill Cumorah and he meets Moroni, and he tries to get the plates and then is stopped. And then he goes to Susquehanna in 1825.
Yeah, so we won't get there till another book, but yeah, there wonderful stories down there, even more wild.
So you talk a little bit about in this amazing book, you talk about the legend of Captain Kidd, and you've got some really cool illustrations of the pirates, and I love it that you've got the people digging, and then someone gets shot and he falls into the pit, and we're assuming maybe gets buried. Can you talk about really quickly, and this is going to be obvious for those who study this stuff, but probably not obvious for those who haven't, how Kidd plus a digger plus someone getting shot and buried then leads to the spirit, and then that leads to the lore that then leads maybe even to the idea of a Moroni as a spirit guarding treasure. Talk about any of that just to give people an understanding of stuff they may not really know anything about.
Okay. So with the Kidd tale, there's many, many variations of that, but essentially someone is killed and buried with the treasure. And by doing that, you're creating an angry spirit, or sometimes it's a volunteer. They're I'll protect your treasure and you can kill me. So there's it just depends on the variation, but I think generally it's sort of the idea is the spirit is angry and is there and will frighten away those that are attempting to disturb them. And they're not necessarily guarding the treasure, but there are other versions where, it's straight up they're guarding the treasure, and unless you do certain things, then they're not going to let you have it. With Moroni, there's sort of there's definitely some connections between the story of Kidd and Moroni, but even with Moroni, there's a what's it called? Not folklore, a story that's not very well documented, where he is basically killed on the spot And it's, someone said to somebody who said to somebody who somebody, and it goes back to Joseph Smith, allegedly, right, where he describes that, yeah, he was killed there and is in fact guarding the treasure in that way as well. So that's, no historian would count that as like real history, I don't think, but it is sort of a tale that's passed down.
But going back to that, it doesn't matter what's true or false. I mean, it matters what's true or false, but for purposes of narrative building, it doesn't matter what's true or false, because what mattered is that everybody believed it to be true and then decided to act upon it. Right. And so everyone's repeating the story of Captain Kidd. And I mean, it gets really ludicrous because so we, drove by the spot where the Captain Kidd dig was in Susquehanna, and it's a beautiful little field, but it's really far inland. Like, to imagine that a pirate ship, well, I mean, they got on the small ship and went up, but like to imagine they went that far inland, to me seems like on its face ridiculous personally. Or to believe that there's a Spanish silver mine in Vermont, also kind of ridiculous, but the people believed it and they made their decisions based on that. So
they wanted to believe it too, because it gave them a chance at life. Like if you find treasure, then your life will become different.
It's like playing the lottery.
Poor, right? They were super. A lot of them were super poor.
Yep.
Tell me how many minutes you guys have. I want to make sure I manage the questions based on how much time you have.
If we could be done in 30 minutes, that'd be ideal. But up to an hour if we're like really into it.
Okay. So we'll shoot for 2:30 my time. Is that right? 4:30 your time.
Yeah. Or no, wait.
Yes, 4:30 our time.
Is it 4:30?
Okay.
Oh, right.
Yeah, one of the real aha moments that I had, and you guys can tell me if I'm totally missing the boat here. Once I started studying the treasure digs a little bit, I realized that the core Book of Mormon narrative seems to just, like the structural narrative seems to grow out of the treasure digs, because what do regular treasure digs and the Book of Mormon narrative have in common? Okay, you've got treasure that's buried. It's in a hill. You've got to search for it. It's guarded by some type of spirit that you have to engage with. And then there's a seer that finds it, who's got some sort of magical device that helps them find it. And this idea of slippery treasure that can't be found. There's Joseph, he's supposed to get the plates, but then he can't get the plates. And, and over time, you just realize, wait a minute, maybe the Book of Mormon narrative, just comes out of like God telling Joseph through an angel, this is a story that happened. But if you have a more naturalistic worldview, it's just like, wait a minute, Joseph learned about all this treasure digging stuff with spirits and seers and digs and slippery treasure. Wow, it just would make a lot more sense. And I'm not asking you to opine on this, but is it fair to say there's pretty direct structural parallels between the basic treasure digging kind of structure and what ends up being the Book of Mormon narrative?
Right. I mean, they're definitely linked, and it just depends on how you look at it, right? If you're a skeptic, then it's very much like pretty clear that one thing leads to the other in the way you've described. But if you're a believer, you can say, well, because I mean, at this point, that they're definitely saying Joseph did do treasure digging. Well, what was the point of it? Why was God preparing him in this way, right? He's learning new abilities and kind of getting in touch with the spiritual world. And maybe even Moroni, I'm putting on my apologist hat, but maybe Moroni did appear as a toad-like creature at first, just to kind of get him comfortable with the idea. That's just an idea. But so I would say, yeah, there's direct lines for sure. And anything else you want to say? No. All right.
I think that a lot of our listeners will be familiar with the salamander, the white salamander, but they would likely think, well, wait a minute, that turned out to be Mark Hoffman's forgery. Right. So let's remove amphibians from the Joseph Smith narrative. Explain to us just really quickly, even if you already have. I mean, you said Lumen Walters had a stuffed toad, but how do amphibians play into, a credible? How do amphibians have a credible association with Joseph Smith?
So the main account, it comes from Willard Chase, and he's relating an early telling of sort of what he heard from Joseph, which is that there was a toad-like creature that came out of the box and it became a man, right? So it's not actually a toad. It's like maybe like a hobgoblin or something, like however we would picture it today. It's probably different, but just for simplicity, I usually just use a toad. And so Mark Hoffman just didn't make that, just like everything he did, he thought of, he found examples and just kind of twisted them a little bit. So that's a very early account, but that's not the only one. We have versions of it evolving later on. Is it Orlando Saunders? Orlando, I think, talks about the toad becoming like really, really big and like glittering eyes and smacking Joseph, and he rolls down the hill and wakes up at midday or something. So, the story, it's a big fish story, gets bigger. And they're very cool. So
I just realized that like witches, I guess toads are often associated with witches and witchcraft. So
yeah.
it's kind of in this broader
Right.
kind of folk magic narrative a little bit.
Right.
Well, and it dates. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I didn't have anything.
You've got the super cool sketch of like chiromancy and palm reading. Tell it, and again, it's part of a story in one of the chapters in your book. What does palm reading have to do with Joseph Smith?
Well, there's early stories. Christopher Stafford is telling a story about how Joseph was reading his palm and told him that he wouldn't live very long, and he found that humorous, I guess, giving the account later in life.
He was very old. It was many years later.
Yeah, I don't know how old.
I think he was pretty old at the time. What's the date on that one, John? I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah,
it's March 1885.
Yeah, so 65 years later, he's still kicking. So.
Yeah, but and I guess that's sort of like a harmless kind of magic, and I think I wanted to kind of do that whole progression thing as well, and so that's why I was like, okay, I'm going to take that story and stick it in, even before I have a dowsing story. But we know that he would palm read, and I think we have stories about Lucy. I can't remember offhand, but there's palm readers. A lot of people probably did that. So fortune telling, dream interpretation, those are all like early magic things, but not what we would consider probably harmless today.
Well, so Lucy, definitely we have a source of her doing dream reading.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Rockwell's would do that. Or Porter Rockwell told a story to Elizabeth Kane, and she wrote it down, and Brigham Young was there as well. So we definitely have some stories like that, where they'd be trying to figure out what the dreams meant and where they should be digging based off those dreams. So
you've got this really good quote. A lot of times we're led to think when we're trying to make the Book of Mormon look just that it could never have been created by a human. I think maybe we've been taught to think of Joseph Smith as being incapable of doing something really brilliant. You've got this really great quote on page 25 from Lucy. I'm sure you know the quote that I'm talking about. Do you want me to read it?
Sure. Yeah.
It says, never mind about my son Joseph, for the boy will be able some of these fine days to buy the whole of Palmyra and all the folks in it. You don't know what a brain my boy has under that old hat. And of course, it's not unique for moms to be proud of their kids, but she clearly felt like Joseph was super smart. No?
Yeah, but it's interesting because you can compare that with other statements where they're like, man, Joseph, he was not bright. But who was bright was his mom. His mom, she must be the one behind the Book of Mormon. Or other times it's the dad. The dad is the one who, did the Book of Mormon or the Gold Bible, So we'll have statements that really conflict all the time. And I think, you just try to take them at face value and use the information you can from them. So. Yeah.
I'm just trying to call out some of the things I really loved about this book. In the same chapter, you've got an excerpt from the Windsor, Vermont, where it talks about money digging. And I guess it would be easy to think that everybody back then was superstitious or into folk magic, and that everyone was treasure digging. It would almost seem like that's what the church might want us to think, is that most people were doing it. It wasn't so weird or so bad. But I love this quote on money digging that basically says, "We are sorry to observe, even in this enlightened age, so prevalent a disposition to credit the accounts of the marvelous. Even the frightful stories of money being hid under the surface of the earth and enchanted by the devil or Robert Kidd are received by many of our respectable fellow citizens as truths. We had hoped that such a shameful undertaking would never have been acted over again in our country till the following event occurred not long ago in our vicinity." And to me, what that shows is that there was a broad general understanding that this stuff was shady and even illegal. And it's really cool and even Benjamin Franklin calls that out in the early 1700s, if I remember correctly. Anything you guys want to add about that?
Yeah, that is why I included that there's people at that time that were definitely, calling it out, but there was other newspapers printed that said, this is a real deal. Like so-and-so found some gold out here. So just keep that in mind, that whoever's writing the article obviously is going to state their opinion too.
Well, and Porter Rockwell said that that everybody was digging, but Joseph just did it openly. And I don't think he means actually everybody was, but it was in their community, it was pretty common. But, Joseph did it openly, whereas other people would be ashamed to admit it. Like the dig on Miners Hill takes place on Abner Cole's property. And yet Abner Cole is such a hostile, skeptical source. So did he allow the dig to happen and maybe even helped fund it, or was he supportive of it? And then he got embarrassed, and then that's why he became hostile? Or did he think it was a joke all along, but he's like, whatever, they can dig on my land? I mean, like, what was the motivation there for Abner Cole to be so hostile and yet allow money diggers on his property? And then the last thing I'd say is that it's easy to make it like a class or education thing, but that's really not the case. Not in neat lines anyway. So Chamberlain, who funds.
Oh yeah, I do that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the dig at the Markle farm that was done with the dowsing rod was funded by Chamberlain. Chamberlain was wealthy, educated. He was a state senator or state rep of some kind.
Well, it could be. I mean, sorry, it's not really specifically. It could be, but in general, he was funding him in the area to look for an iron chest. So
okay, well, so Chamberlain, but the point is Chamberlain was educated, had political influence, social standing, class, etc. Josiah Stoll, same thing. I mean, he's funding,
or even like Martin Harris, who I don't think he really funds Joseph or whatever, but obviously he funds the Book of Mormon, which is big.
But I don't know that he funds the treasure digging. Right?
Yeah, but you could look at him. Well, he was fairly well respected. Other than people were like, yeah, but he can see. What does he say? He's a great believer in spooks or whatever. So there's some of these, or I would say even William Stafford. Like he's one of the first people. I think people along that area, they named Stafford Road after him. He can't be just like he's probably respected enough, and yet he is involved in it and admits to it, which is interesting. But
so educated and wealthy people could still believe in this sort of stuff and be involved in it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, it was poor people. So, and
it was looked down upon by maybe some of the more established parts of society. Fair to say?
Yeah.
I learned about Lumen Walters first from Grant Palmer, I believe, in Insider's View. Now, was there a question? Is it some places he's referred to as just Lumen or just Walters? And there's some question about whether that is the Lumen Walters. I guess that was part one, and then part two is like, is there any suggestion that Joseph hung out with Lumen Walters and like was formally tutored in any way? You guys may have already addressed this, but I just wanted to get it clear.
Let's see. First half of that question.
The man with a dark colored stone.
Yeah, I think that's what maybe that's what you're hinting at there, John, is there's a Fayette Lapham account there's several accounts that talk about like a magician coming to town or like somebody, but they don't name them. Brigham Young talks about a certain man who could swear very, he would swear very good, and but he doesn't name him as Lumen. But I think we've kind of combined these accounts, and not just me, but like lots of historians have said, well, perhaps this is this person that we're talking about, where Joseph sees a dark colored stone, or he looks in a dark colored stone where a certain man was looking for lost items. Perhaps this is also the same person that we're talking about here as Lumen Walters. And then, so that's kind of, we do have stories about Lumen Walters. We have other stories, and some of those have been combined to all be the same individual, if that makes sense. The other half of the question was,
was he ever formally tutored? Well, no. So because Lumen Walters definitely was around, he was called in to help find the plates, right? Is that specifically named Lumen, or is that the magician?
I think they don't name him. I have to look, but I think at that point it's just a certain, again, like a person that comes down. I don't think we name him as Walter.
Who's the guy who they're in the tavern and says, "I can't find the plates, but this is a guy who will"?
Oh yeah, that was supposed to be. See, again, now see, in my own mind, I've started to combine these sources, but that is supposed to be Walters, I think. I'd have to double check on that too. But what was the other part?
What's did he ever formally tutor? So because the idea is like if like Lumen passed the mantle to Joseph, right?
Yeah, and that's
I
actually
thought that
what
story
they say.
was told by Brigham Young.
No. Abner Cole is, again, the guy that's kind of telling this story. He says that the mantle of Walters fell on Joseph, and that's Abner Cole. So if we believe, or if we can assume that Abner Cole had firsthand experience with this, and he's not just writing an angry newspaper article, perhaps he is telling us something that he saw,
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is probably the $1 million question. Do you, from your readings, what do you conclude? And it's impossible to know. So this would be speculation, but it's just your best hunch. When Joseph is, there's kind of, there's sincere believer. Let's say option 1 is sincere believer. Option 2 is complete fraud. Option 3 is kind of Dan Vogel's pious fraud. As it relates to the treasure digging that Joseph Smith did during the times that you cover in this book, do you get the sense that Joseph really thought that these stones had power, that he really thought that he had power, that when he took people out and the shovel is clanking on something, Joseph really believes that they're about to hit a chest, and that then when the treasure gets removed, that Joseph really believes that spirits are carting the treasure away? Do you have any reason to opine on option A, B, or C, or do you guys just don't even want to go there in terms of opining or speculating?
Let's see. I generally kind of subscribe to pious fraud anyway, but where he's doing things for the right reason, or he's doing things to try to get to an end
that he believes is justified.
Yeah, but as far as we can't unfortunately be in Joseph's mind either, and it's a shame he didn't tell more of his own stories, because we're relying on outsiders, and we're relying on people that are telling these stories that they were unsuccessful. So I think it seems that Joseph indicates, it definitely seems like he had others believed, that he really was seeing what he saw, like Josiah Stoll, like we mentioned before. But
he had success of a kind, and that's why he had a following. I'm not talking about like in the future with Book of Mormon things, but there were reasons people came to him. Like, he was taking away Sally's clientele because he was being successful, to the point that people speculated whether he was hiding, right? I'm
Oh yeah, that's true.
that people actually speculated that he would steal things and hide them so that he could then find them,
Right.
because he was so successful at finding things. And we don't have a lot of those stories of just like finding,
Right.
you know, I don't know, missing flour or whatever domestic item it was. Those don't get retold to where we can see that. But I think that, what was I going to say about the pious fraud versus whatever? I think it's just that we don't have anything in Joseph's own words. Everything is secondhand. And so then even the things we have in Joseph's own words, like where he says that he's going to give up digging after the glass liquor trial, that is still told secondhand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we just have to take the stories as they are again, and hopefully you make your own, you make your own decision based off of the evidence in front of you.
Yeah. And I, I mentioned in one of the TikToks that I think I made at one point that, there is an account of Joseph Smith saying to his dad, Isaac, or his father-in-law, Isaac, I never could really see anything in the stone. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are saying that's a secondhand account. I guess there's, I would say maybe not all secondhand accounts. Tell me how you guys think about some of these sources. Not all secondhand accounts are equal, because if we know that Joseph was embarrassed about the treasure digging and that he tried to like dismiss it or downplay it or hide it for a long time, if we know that the church has been embarrassed about treasure digging for a long time, if we know that at some point he got in trouble with the law and then had to stop it, and then if we know that he later says, I was involved in sketchy activities and I'm embarrassed by some of my early behaviors, I'm an imperfect guy. Then if there's a secondhand account that has Joseph saying, I could never see anything in the first place, crying in front of Isaac, it's like, yeah, that all seems to fit. Mm-hmm. And so that secondhand account seems like I would be more inclined to want to look at that as credible than something that seemed to have no real grounding in reality. Is it fair to kind of hold that secondhand account with a little bit of credulity?
Yeah. I mean, you're probably talking to the wrong guy here, because I love any secondhand or third-hand account even. But
see, so this is a difference. Mark is like, one person said this one time and he loves it, and I'm like,
yeah.
But that's just a difference in approach. But that secondhand account is corroborated by others.
Right. Yeah. That's, if you're doing this in a better way than I do, you actually compare. I mean, I do this as well, but it's not my main focus. But it's like you say, okay, well, where's the similarities that this source is saying this thing, and he's very anti Joseph, or at least is now at this point. And then you have these other guys that are like very pro Joseph. Where do they overlap? And those are definitely true. And then you have to look at the other elements that they're saying.
So that one is Isaac Hale, but then Peter Ingersoll, William Stafford.
Well,
Ingersoll.
Yeah, Ingersoll is reporting that story.
Right.
Right.
And he helped Joseph move, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's firsthand to Pete. Okay. I guess where I would take the distinction, and again, this is me, not Mark, is that Peter Ingersoll it's a firsthand account for Peter Ingersoll because he witnessed the event. He saw what happened, and he's just reporting what Joseph said. But did Joseph honestly feel those things? Was Joseph expressing the truth? I mean, there's no way really to know. But, or was Joseph just telling Isaac Hale what Isaac Hale wanted to hear? So that's like the way to look at that. And I'm not trying to say that account didn't happen, or that it didn't, that Joseph didn't admit to this. It's just a way of trying to analyze that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being repetitive here, but I just don't like it when, and I think Dan McClellan's awesome, and I'm grateful for him, and he deserves tons of respect. I don't like it when apologists just dismiss an account. It's like, oh, second hand. And they didn't like Joseph, so can't use the source at all.
No. That's too easy. That's way too easy. I mean, you need to just think about, okay, well, Peter Ingersoll's not anti-Joseph. Peter Ingersoll witnessed this. You think he is?
It depends on the story.
All right, depends on the story. Okay, he witnesses this.
He's definitely anti-Joseph Sr. and Alvin, and then perhaps he's listed as an early follower of Joseph by someone. I can't remember who offhand, but so it's kind of maybe he believed Joseph.
Early
maybe.
follower Joseph the prophet. Like
Yeah, but the line is not. It's like really fuzzy, like where early believer of Joseph in Mormonism and late believer in Joseph treasure digging. You know, like those are not very clear lines.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's awesome. I loved in the chapter with Sally Chase, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I loved, and you draw her so beautifully, and she's got her eyes, and I'm almost wanting she to be an early romance with Joseph. I don't know if you had that maybe in your mind a little bit, but that was fun to just kind of imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's Joseph doing alone with her, while they're looking at the hat and looking in stones and gazing deeply into each other's eyes? You know, it was fun to think about that. Is there anything you want to say about that?
I mean, just that I think that Joseph would have been, he would have been influenced by her as a peer. And we know Joseph, we know his sexual drive later is pretty intense. So I don't see it unreasonable that he found her fascinating in other ways. But
also,
there's other girls though.
Alvin's closer in age to her.
Yeah.
So I actually think she and Alvin had a thing more than
I
have like a lot of theories about this actually. But that being said, it's a small town. There's not that many people. I mean, it's like everyone in high school dates everyone at some point, right? Like in a small high school. So who knows?
I'm gonna call it that Erin Elwood's additional contribution. She's gonna write the historical fiction romance novel of Joseph and Sally.
All right, done.
Yeah.
Alvin.
No one wants to read anything about romantic novel with Joseph Smith.
Yeah, sorry.
Like a believer doesn't want to read that. An ex-Mormon doesn't want to read that.
That's because you haven't written it yet, Erin.
No, but just knowing his
where it goes.
Yeah, his future abuses. No one wants that.
Yes. It kind of can make you sick to your stomach knowing how it ends. It
was fun for a second to imagine it.
It's hard to get excited about a youthful romance with Joseph once you know how it ends, right?
Right. That's
Yeah, that makes sense. People are asking about Alvin. Somebody wrote, please tell us the rest of the story about Alvin in a sheet on the roof.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to say about
that? Was me just speculating. I mean, the story is that it's actually a story Martin Harris is telling. He's just listing some reasons why they were unsuccessful. And one of the 3 reasons he lists is that a giant appeared on the barn and scared the diggers away. I was just speculating if you take it from a skeptical view, you don't say, okay, there really was a giant on the barn. So
how do you explain that?
Yeah, like you can, maybe it could have been anything. So,
but I think you're drawing that in volume 2, right?
Yeah, I am. So I am drawing that story. So again, I'm not drawing what I believe. I'm drawing what the accounts say. So I am including that scene in volume 2, and in it, there will be literally like a giant on the barn. And when we say giant, I generally think how they did back then, which from other sources, that they're large people, not like massive giants. We're talking, like the story about Joseph trying to put the Urim and Thummim to his face, but he can only look through one lens because they're so big, right? So that's the end of that story. It's not literally Alvin.
But you're just trying to think about like how, if this was actually like some kind of planned strategy, conspiracy, then it was, was Alvin in a sheet on the right? Because that's a different way to tell all these stories. So if someone who wants to go out and just like go for broke with Joseph was a con man and illustrate it that way, there you go.
That would be cool too, but that's not what I'm going to do. So,
all right. Mark writes, here's my question. Was Mark influenced by Spiegelman's Mouse? No idea what Mark is.
That's a recently banned book in Tennessee. Did you know that?
Yeah. My home state. I think I have it upstairs.
You do. And Mouse too, right?
I've got both of them. Good book.
Yeah, but I don't know.
It's
I
not
guess
on your private place. So.
My main books that I'm influenced by, I have over here, and I would say I really like Hellboy. I mean, this is not at all related, and it's very. I mean, other than it's like magic, you know, and I love the style of Hellboy.
Is that
I mean,
DC or Marvel? I'm trying to remember.
no, that's
Dark Horse.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's
Either?
Dark Horse.
Okay.
yeah. Sorry, I'm really not a comic guy. I'm a concept artist, and I decided that comics are an excellent way to tell a story because you can relate so much information visually and graphically, and with words is just a great way to do that. So I'm treating it almost like storyboards. And then there's some other, I don't know, like, what's the main one? No, there's a graphic novel called Noah that I really like the art style in. But what else? Anything else that we want to?
Well, I know that Mark did a lot of research to see like what did people in that time imagine demons to look like?
Oh yeah.
Because we can all picture demons today, but we have like CGI and like prosthetics, and we've all watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But what did it?
I don't know. We're dating ourselves.
Everyone has, right?
Yep.
That's watching. And so in 1820, if Joseph thought of a demon, what did that look like? So Mark has spent a lot of time looking at that kind of thing. Is like, what did people picture the fantastical and the magical and the divine to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Joe writes, what was going on with the Smith family parchments and Joseph's Jupiter talisman?
Yeah, that's really good. So unfortunately, there's no story that we have, and if anyone knows one, please send it to me. But that includes those magical implements. You know, we do have them, like we talked about, killing an animal with, and it could be. I'm going to draw it with a Mars dagger, right, which is another magical implement that was supposed to have belonged to Smith. But it makes sense that those things were used, and I just wish that it was specifically called out in an account. What is going on with them though?
So Lumen Walter supposedly made the parchments.
That's one theory, or like someone else, but there's enough there to not, like, I think that they did own them, and like I said, I wish there was stories
about how they used them or what they did with them, right?
Yes, but and you can do, I mean, there's been a lot of research on what all the parts, I don't know if you're asking like what all the parts mean on there, like all the little diagrams and things, but there is some of that information out there. But
generally it comes from the Magus.
Yeah, and other,
which is a magical book.
Other
from European
grimoire type books, but they're supposed to protect you, or generally like the Jupiter talisman, I think, is supposed to grant power. You're supposed to have power over others, which is kind of interesting that Joseph was supposed to have had that. And then the layman's, the parchments were protective in nature, or to help you receive a visitation from a spirit.
And so one of them is called the Holiness of the Lord parchment, which I find so fascinating.
Oh yeah, and it's
because
Holiness of the Lord, right?
The way again that these things blend, and so Holiness of the Lord is a very like sacred thing for LDS belief, and it's on the temple, but at the same time it is on this parchment, and so it
repeated thrice.
It is repeated thrice.
Yeah. So yeah, we definitely. I mean, there's enough connections to not doubt that those were involved. It's just it's hard for me to figure out exactly how.
I gave you this for Christmas.
Yeah.
Is that a Jupiter talisman?
Yeah.
Our toad was holding it. I forgot.
I love it.
Yeah.
So Joseph wore one of those and believed that it gave him special powers, or at least wanted people to believe that it gave him special powers.
Yeah. We don't know any story related to it, but that seems to be the case that he had it.
One person that may have joined us late asks, which of you two actually did the illustrations? And that's not Erin. That's Mark Elwood who did the illustrations.
I'm getting a lot of credit being on this podcast with him, but the reality is that this is like Mark's baby.
Well, Erin's much better with words, and as you can tell, she's a better speaker. So I like
You're Erin. You're Moses, and she's your Erin.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. That's nice.
No, but I mean, it definitely was a family project. Our son is with a neighbor right now. But
he could tell you more about Joseph Smith than anybody.
I honestly think he knows a lot more about Joseph Smith than I think
Well, let's
Yeah.
be careful what we say.
A lot of
It's a
people.
family of super Mormon nerds in all the best ways, right?
Yeah.
And so, but no, it's a family project, because we would take trips to Kirtland, Nauvoo, Palmyra, and Mark will, be down in his office, illustrating, and
Mhm.
we all have to pitch in. So,
And also you work, and Erin, and I would say you're able to financially support some, and so do you, like you both do, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, this happened in our life where,
Yeah, we're right place, right time.
I work, Mark is a stay-at-home dad, but like we tried doing the dual income thing for a minute, or, dual working parent thing after our son was born. And it was really hard. It is really hard.
Yeah.
My hat off to anyone who can make it work. But we were like, looked at our finances, you know what, Mark, if you want to stay home, you can. And that coincided with the seerstone coming out, and it just,
and I do take on freelance computer rendering, like spacecraft stuff, which is completely different, right? But honestly, mostly I'm doing this now, and it's really
when he's
fun.
not parenting, which is a full-time job,
which is super fun.
I want to get to how people can both buy this book and support future books. I'm going to get there in just one second. There was a question of whether Joseph found any real treasure. We've already kind of addressed that.
Mm-hmm.
The quick answer, did he ever find any real treasure? Is there evidence that he ever found any real treasure that we would consider treasure? The short answer.
That's a good way to put
John,
it.
I love your precise question.
Yeah, that's good. So we give a precise answer.
Sorry, John and I got into like a debate yesterday about how like your question's too broad. You need to be precise.
Well, so I mean, no, there's no real treasure that was found by Joseph. If you had to really pin me against the wall and tell, that's it. But but the seerstone was found by him, 2 seerstones,
and those were valuable to him.
Yes.
I mean, they were valuable to people who believed in that culture.
I think the people that are asking are like,
I know they want to know: did they find Captain Kidd's treasure, gold,
and
money?
And that was a follow-up question. What's that?
That stuff doesn't exist.
Yeah, that was the other question, is like, think of the thousands of treasure digs that happened during the 100 or 200 or 300 years before and after. Was ever any treasure like that ever found of chests of doubloons, or ancient Mayan gold artifacts, or Aztec, or I don't know, Mohican, like I don't even know who, Seneca.
Yeah.
Like,
well, they did find. I mean, Kidd did actually bury treasure, which is what spawned the whole thing.
But it was like one treasure,
right?
Like he buried one treasure somewhere.
And then the story, Gardner's Island. I mean, they retrieved it.
I thought they retrieved it.
Yeah, so it's. But then there's like, well, maybe there's more out there, and and he's not the only one, but that's really where it began, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, you've got Dan Vogel weighing in. He writes, "Good job. I love the stuffed toad behind you." Shout out to Dan and his amazing book, Joseph Smith.
I'm excited for Dan's new book as well.
Making of a Prophet. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan, for starting us on this journey.
Oh my gosh. I'm having a headset malfunction. Just one second. I respect Dan Vogel so much that I needed to plug his book. So
no, you absolutely should.
And that is, I have it over there. That is sort of what started me on this journey. Like it's sort of his fault, and I'm glad he wrote that book, because
and the dialogue article, because again, Mark pinpointed them on Google Maps, and then we drove and we saw all of them, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dan. We love you, Dan. We hope Signature Books approves your Nauvoo biography of Joseph Smith.
I'm so excited for that book.
I know we kind of got to get you guys out of here, and I promised I would. So let me just.
If there's questions, we keep going, but if there's not, or it's
there's a ton of questions. Okay, really quick. Let's see. Max George writes, "I'm curious if you spent a lot of time looking into digging Alvin's body up, he's the guardian spirit, to get the plates. So did they dig up Alvin's body?"
So that scene will be, it's going to be in book 3, actually, unfortunately. But, so yes, they dug up Alvin for some reason, right? I mean, we know that happened, and we just don't know for sure what that means, right? So there's lots of theories. I think Mark Hoffman really started the rumor mill for sure on that one, but I don't know if there was something before that other than that we know that he was dug up. And it seems strange that they would dig him up to try to determine whether his body was disturbed when he, like, as Vogel has said recently, like you could just look at the ground and see that it wasn't disturbed. So there's got to be more, again, there's got to be more of the story there, right? And so the way I'm going to treat it in a way where I'm going to present the facts, right? And have them actually exhume Alvin, but maybe we don't see exactly what happens at that point. But I'm using it as a motivational reason for why Joseph gives up treasure digging temporarily. It disturbs him.
It's so disturbing that they did that. Yeah.
He gives back his seerstone to Willard Chase, and
because he's like, well, we took it too far, guys.
Yeah. So,
Jeff writes, I think this is probably a rhetorical question. Could Joseph Smith have planted some things in the digs to gain confidence?
Certainly.
He could have, and so then what would be potential examples of what he might have? The feather is the one that comes to mind.
Yeah, the feather. I mean, some people say that the stone, this type of stone, shouldn't be where it was found. Perhaps the
brown one,
the brown chocolate stone, or whatever. And definitely people accused him of that. That he would hide things and go retrieve them.
That's less like treasure digging and more like finding lost things using the seerstone.
And Peter Ingersoll tells a story about his cows missing, and then this isn't Joseph, but then Joseph Sr. Goes and says, hey, we can find the cows. I'll use this rod. I'll show you how to do it. And they go and they do find the cows, but Ingersoll's like, this was super deceptive. Look, they're even milked. Someone milked my cows. You knew they were here all along, So yeah, that's a possibility for sure.
This is totally not connected to this book. Ryan asks, is there evidence that there's a connection between Dartmouth College, Mormonism, Ethan Smith, view of the Hebrews?
Go back to the map. Let's see.
Ethan Smith
on the map. I saw him the other day. I don't know if I'm going to find him again.
You want to put the map up there?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, they're all really close together.
Well, crap. I'm not going to be able to find it now. Here, you think you can find it?
Well, we know that Alvin attended Dartmouth College, right?
So there's where Ethan Smith lived.
Right here's where Oliver Cowdery lived. This is the wood scrape.
There's Joseph Sr. allegedly.
Oh, that's never mind. But
that's too big a yield.
Yeah. So Lumen's right here. I mean, so everyone's coming out of Vermont and New Hampshire. The Smiths live all up here. There's so many treasure digs right around them, and I would love to connect some of these. The dates kind of check out, and I'm researching those as we speak, a few of these right now.
And so I'm sorry that doesn't really answer your question, Ryan, about view of the Hebrews and Book of Mormon and mythology, etc. But Ethan Smith was, right there. And the other thing,
it seems to imply just geographically that there's a connection, at least.
Well, I guess View of the Hebrews is all about how Jews came from. Okay, well, because I would say the Indian mounds, or there's a lot of Indian mounds in this area, Native American mounds. Sorry.
But I think we threw out the name Zim for a minute. Why don't we just pull that slide up just for a second?
Okay, yeah.
So Ethan, everyone was trying to explain why we're seeing earthworks and things like that. And just for instance, this guy, this isn't related to Joseph, so I just had some sketches I had done of him. But Zim is a nearby seer located in Rochester, and he goes, he puts his stone in his cap, and he does a slightly different where he pulls it to his face, but then slowly moves it away. And then
he pulls it to his face to exclude the light. They use the exact same phrase, exclude the light.
Exclude the light.
Yeah.
And then, and he has two seer stones, one leading to another one. But so very similar to Joseph. And then he describes the former inhabitants of the land. And so just like Ethan has done, and in this case, he's doing it as a visionary thing where there's these different civilizations of people. And some were giants, some were these he called them pygmies, and that they came before the Native Americans,
and that they buried their treasures in the hills of that area, and that and then he found some gold wedges.
And the coolest thing is that he describes these pygmies fighting these giants. And so I have
You guys, it's just fun.
Yeah.
Super fun. And I have to call out the Monty Python reference there.
Oh, okay, good. I'm sorry.
That is from Monty Python and the Holy Grail with Tim the Enchanter. And he says, there are some who call me Tim.
And actually, his name in the document is Tim, but they don't think there was anyone named Tim, and they think it was a missed thing. So it's them. But yeah, so good job, John. I'm glad you got that.
Hey, I can be nerdy. I can get a little nerdy sometimes. So many people are saying this show was so entertaining.
Oh.
Some people are saying best show ever. Literally.
Oh no, we really got in the weeds there. It was a little bit too much like college lecture or something. I'm sorry, but
yeah, it's okay though. We did good. For our first try.
Our first try.
No.
Here it is. Excellent. Angela writes, excellent show today.
No,
people are loving you guys. I would love you guys to come back as often as you want, because your knowledge, your dynamic is cute together. It's endearing, but you both have such a command of the knowledge. I just think you've done a really important work, and I'm so honored that and thrilled that you'd come on to share it.
Thank you for inviting us. I've been texting with the babysitter, so if there's like any burning questions, burning question.
Really quick, do you guys think that Joseph fashioned tin plates or fashioned
that's a good question
about plates? Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good question. I do think there's something like I a lot of times we like to say, oh, there was no plates, no one ever saw anything. Well, there's enough people hefting something, right? This is my personal opinion again, and I'm going to draw it differently, but I will say that I believe it went from one. He had like a mock-up version 1, mock-up version 2, and perhaps even a really cool looking gold plates mock-up. But that's, if you're a skeptic, that's how I believe it. But I'm illustrating it where actually Dan Vogel thought of this awesome idea where there's some sources that kind of indicate that Joseph may have been almost throwing out a red herring to try to either get people off the trail a little bit, like, oh, it's not real, I'm not describing it very well. Just read. You have to read Making a Prophet. There's a really good part in there where he's describing. Man, it's been a while.
Okay, well, so actually, to that, a related point, but not really related. It's like a cultural aspect of that time is the way that the rumor mill worked.
Oh yeah.
And so I think Joseph, but others that in that time are really good at planting ideas, like little tiny seeds, and then letting the people do the work for them.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what
that's what I was trying to say was like
Vogel theory.
Yeah, like he goes to Willard Chase and asks for a box. He's like, I really need a box. Like, I got to get a box. And so then it's like Willard's going to be like, well, so did you get something? Like, and then he's going to go compare notes with somebody else. And
did you hear Joseph was asking for a box?
Joseph was out late last night, and he's got a head injury now. Like
he walked around with a bandage for like a couple weeks.
Well, yeah, or like he went to the doctor and the doctor said
he had scrapes on his abdomen.
He's like, yeah, I was attacked by a devil, like, so those type of stories, like, just build. And there's others, not just Joseph, but there's other seers that follow that deliberately, purposely, like telling parts of the story, letting people fill in the rest. So
I love it.
Like going to a tavern. And like, there's one guy that was like notorious for that.
Yeah, like
this is not Joseph. It's
there's another story of a guy. He came into town. He was poor like yesterday, but all of a sudden he's riding a really nice horse. Like, well, what happened? And then people are asking him, but he won't tell anyone. And then he's like he's buying rounds of drinks for people, and then before you know it, he's revealed to somebody that, oh yeah, we found some gold, and I think we can find more. And then, so then they're all buying into this and making, drawing out contracts. And then the store, they planted little seeds, and then they skipped town and, take.
So they didn't even do a dig.
No, they didn't. Yeah.
They didn't even do a dig in that one. Wow.
So that's a possibility too.
All right. Well, there's. I hope to have you guys back. There's so much more we could talk about. Let's just really get into number one, how people buy this book.
Right.
What happens when it sells out? No, the first thing I want to say is buy this book. Like right now, by the end of the show, I want them to be sold out of books. So that's number one. Everyone go buy this book right now. The website is theglassliquor.com. Is that right?
That's right.
So go buy this book now. I will throw a special party for my listeners if this book gets sold out by the end of this episode. Now,
Thanks, John.
once it gets sold out, how do people reserve a copy once all the copies that exist? And explain why this isn't just something that you just like create the PDF and send it to Amazon and then they pump out books. This is a special, super high quality print.
It is very high quality. It is a very high quality book. We did try doing an online service, and the quality just was not good. It was, and the price difference was not that good. So we're using a local printer here in Atlanta, and they do fantastic high quality work. And the price, honestly, is not much different. And so
that's why we're maintaining.
Oh, so sorry. So it's self-published. We created a publication, printing company, not printing company, a publication company to be able to self-publish this. And so every time we order a print, we have to pay out of pocket upfront. We don't have a Martin Harris to order 5,000 copies for us. So, so we order what we think is reasonable that we can sell. And then we have,
and we just do that.
We get the money back. And so
we have sold out several times from these small buys that we do.
Right. So in any event, we are running out at the moment. We were about to run out. We're like, okay, we're good for a while. And then John invited us on Mormon Stories. So we currently have a new print run in the works. It will be available to ship first week of March. And
anybody that orders in February, I'm going to include like a print as
well.
Right.
So since, it's possible that we'll sell out, we are really sorry for the delay, but we're including anyone that buys in February. We're going to include a print of the Byzantine Joseph, which is the image there in the middle. Of Joseph with his seerstone is like a magical saint guy. And so we'll include a print for you just for being patient, and we appreciate it. But yes, the website works.
But you also can, if there is copies on Benchmark Books.
Thank you.
If you live in Salt Lake City or near there, you should definitely go there. In fact, you can get it faster and probably a little bit cheaper because I give it to them in bulk, and they can I don't have to pay for the shipping. So definitely go there first. I know they have some copies in stock right now.
They have a couple boxes. Yeah.
And I love Chris Bench. I'm a huge fan of Chris Bench and the late Kurt Bench. And so, yes, please support Benchmark Books. Yeah.
It may not actually be cheaper in the end because you'll go in there and buy a lot of other books.
Yeah, that's true. That's what we do.
That's what happens to us. But it'll be worthwhile. You should do it.
Okay. So when the book sells out, they can reserve. You said they can't reserve.
You pay, put in credit card information, everything. It just says it's on back order. And so, because we're taking the orders and we're shipping, we'll get the call from our printer to go pick them up, and we'll pick them up and mail them same day. So
okay. But then also, I think it's really important to understand that we need to have more of these, like great bedtime reading for your children, for your nephews and nieces.
Okay, but there is a dead pirate. That's the only thing.
Okay, so, and there's the bloody face of whoever. Yeah.
But other than that, it's child. I mean, I would say other than that, it's child appropriate. But
so parents. Yeah, but nowadays with the stuff on TV,
I mean, it's not scarier than a Marvel movie. No.
But there is, if you go to the Glass Liquor website, there's a way to become a patron and to support future editions. So talk about that really quickly.
Well, I'm glad you did that because I wanted to call out my patrons. They're really patient with me. I rarely post anything, but they started this for me. Like without the patrons, I wouldn't have been able to do this either. And so I'm kind of revamping this right now. You're welcome to sign up as a patron, but I'm actually have it on hold until I put a lot more content in there.
Like one of the things we talked about is putting the map on there.
Yeah, this map that we're looking at today will probably go onto the patron website, before it's any, publicly available at all. So
because it needs a little bit of cleanup before it's public, but we thought the patrons could maybe
the patrons will get it. And there is already a map that's specific to kid on there, and I have some other maps and charts and things that I'm planning on putting up. So Yes, patrons are welcome, but they really served as the kickoff, and some really awesome people helped me out there.
Yeah.
And we need more we need more supporters. So please not only buy the book, buy multiple copies for friends and family, ward members, bishops, stake presidency members, general authorities. Every general authority someone should buy a copy of this and give it to every general authority.
Oh my gosh. I told Mark I was going to send 13 to church headquarters, and 15, whatever.
There's
I forgot the number.
Those guys.
It was like 12 plus 1, but no, you're right. It's 12 plus 3. 15 to church headquarters, and he was like, no, but we ran out. We actually sold out, and so I wasn't going to waste the money. But church headquarters has bought a few copies. Mm-hmm. They have, I think we've sold 4 to church headquarters.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, someday the church is going to be in a secure place where they embrace pop culture like this, and they're going to think it makes Mormonism cool. Because that's what I think you guys do.
Yeah,
you guys make Mormonism cool.
Well, it's what we want to do. And like Community of Christ. I mean, I think one of the reasons I push back a lot, John, with like, the direction you go on some of these things, it's like, not that I don't agree with you, because I do, right? But is that I'm trying to reserve space for believers and not just LDS, Corporation of Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake, but Community of Christ or Strangite or Cutlerite or Bickertonite or whatever all these ites are. But in particular, Community of Christ has been really open to what Mark is trying to do, because they have a very different relationship with Joseph Smith,
with his history,
with his history. And they denied polygamy all those years, right? So that was like their crisis of faith, and they got through it and are in a better place. So.
And we have several people calling for T-shirts.
What do you guys want on the T-shirt?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Well,
I used to make T-shirts a lot. So,
yeah, like I think, what is it? Medieval Joseph, Gothic Joseph. What is that again?
Byzantine
Joseph. That's a good place to start. The Toad. Sally's eyes. Sally Chase's eyes.
All right. So our son's favorite is Joseph getting kicked. I know everybody said this, but our son's favorite is Joseph gets kicked in the butt by a demon on the hill Cumorah, and so that would be a fun silhouette.
That's from the wood, what's it called? The wood engraving, or that's in the Mormonism Unveiled.
Oh, in the illustrated Mormonism Unveiled, the woodcut engraving. Yeah.
I like the shot of Lumen Walters. Like, how about I am Lumen for the super nerds, something like that. Anyway, all right. Well, listen, we're kind of jokey, but this is not a joke. This book the illustrations are just breathtaking. Mark Elwood, the scholarship, Mark and Erin, is just, in my view, top notch, and the love and the care, and the art, the artistry, and the passion that goes into this book. It deserves much more than a 3-hour Mormon Stories podcast episode.
Thank you, John.
Please go support The Glass Looker, the Collected Tales of Joseph Smith by Mark Elwood, with lots of assists from Erin.
Mm-hmm.
And any final words you guys want to share before we take off? Give you guys the final word.
We meant to say, if anyone's ever in the Palmyra or Susquehanna area, please let us know, because we will send you on a treasure quest.
Yeah, we have this running list of things we're trying to research, and honestly, like, it has been at times a group effort. There's been a lot of people that have helped me, and just really appreciate that.
Yeah, but no, thank you, John. Thanks for having us on. Mm-hmm. Appreciate your patience and working with us. And, let us know. You guys let us know what you want to talk about. Maybe we'll be back.
Somebody's recommending a calendar.
An icon calendar. That'd be good.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I don't know. I've decided, is it too much to keep making icons? Like, I wanted to for this book, but I'm not sure if I continue. I thought it would be cool to do
they're the patron saints of Mormonism.
Right.
Like a triptych. So, sorry, history nerds. Triptych is like a particular type of, art display. And so 3.
Yeah. 3 makes sense to me.
Like the Trinity, the Godhead.
But I am kind of a completionist. And then I when I'm playing video games and things, so I'm like, maybe I should do every seer. Just paint every seer.
I want to see
Odal.
Odal as a... Yeah. All right.
Anyway.
Sorry, guys.
Other
We're out.
sheep wants a toad, wants a t-shirt with the toad on it. And then this is the comment of the day. Joe Walker writes, "It's been magical, peeps. Thanks for hosting."
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, guys, you're great. Thanks so much. Come back soon for part 2, and please stay in touch. We adore you guys. You've become our favorite Mormon couple.
Oh, thank you. Well, we
how about
appreciate the
in
support.
in the South.
How about the
Atlanta?
favorite Southern Mormon couple? I don't want to.
No, there's some other cool Mormon.
Okay, the
Atlanta.
favorite Johns Creek, Georgia Mormon couple. All right.
Keep it really narrow.
Thank you.
All right. See you.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much. You guys take care. Stay in touch.
Thanks. Bye.
And everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on Mormon Stories podcast. This has been so great. Really grateful to Mark and Erin for this incredible contribution. Please do go buy this book right now. Buy it for friends and family. Sell them out, and then order and reserve more copies. We just want this couple to be rewarded for their amazing work, but also I think that you'll love this. Like, even if you think you know Mormon church history, you'll read this book and learn things you never knew before. It's really fun. It's really fascinating. And it's just, it's noble. So thanks to everyone again. Go to theglassliquor.com to order the books. And this has been great. And then I'll just end by saying thanks to everyone who supported us today. Thanks to all the people that made comments, both on Facebook and on YouTube. We really love doing these live streams and getting the feedback and the input. I also want to thank everyone who donates to Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation. We have been, we lose donors every month, whether people fall on financial hard times or they lose interest or they go to support other things. I just want to say we lose donors every month, sometimes 10 to 15 donors. And if we don't replace them, then our revenue starts going down and we have to offer less services or record less episodes, or then we have less support from people like Gerardo and Kara and Jennifer and Jen and Brooklyn and all the staff that helps us make the Open Stories Foundation possible. So if you value this content, if you want to see it continue, if you want to see more, please do support us at mormonstories.org. Click on the donate button, become a monthly donor, or you can donate here in with the stars feature on Facebook or in the super chat feature here at YouTube. You can click on the little $ and make a donation. I think YouTube allows us to take tax deductible donations, or they don't take a cut. So please support us that way. We really do rely on your support to keep things alive. I also will say, for those of you who are still tuned in, several of us are going to be in St. George next week. There is a Thrive St. George conference that's happening. And the dates are February 11th through 13th. I'm going to be there. Natasha Helfer is going to be there. David Bakavoy, Jesse Funk, Sam Young, Sean and Crystal Escobar, Susie Benson. So many cool people are going to be in St. George next weekend. If you just want to have a fun weekend, we're going to do karaoke. There's going to be a cash bar for those who drink. I don't drink. It's just going to be a blast. So please, if you've got some time next weekend and you want to have fun, it's at the Convention Center in St. George. It's only $25 for a 3-day event. There's going to be snacks and other things. So please join us. We want to sell that out. Again, it's Thrive Unite in St. George, February 11th through 13th. Go to thrivebeyondreligion.com and you can register, and it would be fun to karaoke with you guys. So please do that. Please support that. Also, I'll just mention that there's a couple other Thrive events coming down the pike. There's Texas Thrive April 2nd. And there's also Thrive Southern California, April 2nd. And now there's going to be a Thrive Orlando, April 2nd. So again, you can go to the events page at thrivebeyondreligion.com and you can register for any of those events. And we also, want to encourage you guys to spread the word. Huge thanks to Mark Blanchard for his super chat. Mark, thank you for donating. Really appreciate that. And there's going to be more events and exciting things in the weeks, days, and months ahead. I'll end by just saying this as well. in 1 hour, we're going to have Simon Southerton on Mormon Stories podcast. And I'm just going to go ahead and plug Simon's project because it's really, really super cool. We're going to be announcing in just a few minutes that Simon Southerton is signing up to do a monthly episode on Mormon Stories podcast. So many of you will know Simon Southerton. He is a geneticist who's a former Mormon bishop from Australia, and he was excommunicated from the Mormon Church for talking openly about his attempts to reconcile Mormon Church truth claims with Native American DNA. And this is as a geneticist. And so in 1 hour, we're going to be bringing Simon Southerton on Mormon Stories for a special new series. The episode coming up is going to be talking about the creation, but the series is called Mormon Doctrine versus Science. And what Simon's going to do is he's going to join us once a week, and he is going to once a month, and Simon is going to be talking about challenges of Mormon truth claims as they're confronted with modern science, evolution, geology, chemistry, all those sorts of things. And so please join us in an hour for our second live stream of the day with Simon Southerton. But if you want to get a head start on supporting Simon and this incredible new initiative on Mormon Stories podcast, I just want to kind of call your attention. You can actually go to mormonstories.org/podcast/Simon, and you can register to support this new initiative with Simon Southerton, again called Mormon Doctrine versus Science. And so this is where you donate. And everyone should know, everyone who donates to the Simon Southerton Mormon Doctrine versus Science project will receive a free PDF of Simon's new book called The Sacred Curse: How Native American DNA Exposes Mormonism's Lamanite Myth. It's a book that Simon released a couple years ago. It didn't get much play because of COVID. But if you become a monthly donor or subscriber to Simon's new project, you will get a free copy of that book. So please check that out if you can. We really want, just like we're supporting John Larson with his initiatives on Mormon expression and Mormon stories, and we're supporting Margie Dehlin for her new Thrive Story initiative, which we announced recently. We also want to support Simon, and we're going to pay Simon just like we're paying John Larson to come on, and we're paying Margie to do the Thrive Stories initiative. So anyway, so many cool things in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Thanks for your support of Mormon Stories podcast. Thanks to everyone on the Open Stories Foundation staff. Again, Gerardo, Kara Burrell, Brooklyn, Alden, Jennifer, Jen Camp has joined us new. So many people, and of course our amazing Open Stories Foundation board, which is Clint Martin and Carrie Whitbeck. Couldn't do it without you guys. Couldn't do it without your donors. Thanks for supporting us. Thanks for your encouragement. And be good to each other, be kind to each other, and most importantly, stay tuned for another episode of Mormon Stories podcast in an hour. And then, of course, check us out on YouTube, on TikTok at Mormon Stories Podcast, on Instagram, and on Facebook at the Mormon Stories Podcast page. You can always give us a positive review on the Apple Podcast app. We have so many haters that give us bad reviews who don't even listen to the podcast. So if you want to do something for us, go to the Apple Podcast app, give us a positive review, go to the Mormon Stories Podcast page, go to Spotify and give us a positive review on Spotify. We want as many 5-star ratings as we can to fight the haters that just try and bring our ratings down. So please spread the word as well, because that really helps. And if you want to email us at mormonstories@gmail.com, you can always give us feedback. If you have ideas for new episodes, we would love to hear that as well. If you have criticisms or complaints or compliments, we would love to get those at mormonstories@gmail.com. And then, of course, commenting at YouTube, subscribing to us on YouTube, subscribing to our page on Facebook, commenting on Facebook. All of that helps the algorithms, along with sharing this amazing content far and wide. And if you want to share this episode to help sell the book, that would be amazing as well. Anyway, so grateful for everything. You guys, we love you. Thanks for the support. Thanks for all you do. Thanks to all the Never Mormons that listen to Mormon Stories podcast. Our YouTube growth has just been astounding. And we really appreciate all that support. So keep following us. Let us know what we can do to give you more content that you love and need. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you guys all again very soon on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast.